Fashioned for Love, a Silver Script Novel, Book 3, written by Jacqueline Hardy, narrated by Holly Sturm. Chapter 1. Debra clicked save on the file and leaned back in her chair, smiling. The ads for the Walker Apparel clothing line had come out perfect, and she couldn't wait to see their reaction. A glance at the clock told her she was running late and needed to leave for the New Year's party. The thought of skipping it ran through her mind for the 100th time, but she knew she couldn't. She'd promised she'd be there, and her only other option was sitting on her couch eating leftovers while the ball dropped. As appealing as that sounded, she knew she needed to be around people. With a sigh, she stood and pulled on her coat and gloves. The weather had been nasty all December long and hadn't improved. She slipped off her heels and put on her snow boots. Fashion was great until you fell and broke your leg. She put the heels in her bag and left her office, making sure it was locked behind her. Most of the lights in the building were off as she left. The employees of Silver Script Ad Agency had been given permission to work from home if needed because of the weather. Debra only lived a few subway stops away, so it wasn't hard to go in. With the deadline for the ads approaching, she'd spent several hours at the office over the Christmas holiday. Keeping this account meant a lot to the agency. Debra took the elevator down and stepped out onto the tiled floor. The soft thudding of her boots echoed off the walls of the large reception area as she walked to the door. The Christmas decorations that had adorned the room all month had been put away sometime during the day, leaving it feeling bare. She pushed the door open and walked out into the icy wind. New York City was packed full of partiers by the time Debra made it to Times Square. Shouts among friends mixed with the music, filling her senses. She had to push her way through the crowds, apologizing as she brushed past them. It was only a few blocks, but it took much longer than she'd planned. After checking the address again, Debra pulled the door open to a reception center and slipped inside. She'd hoped for a little less chaos, but it was just as crazy inside. Music pounded throughout the room, and lights flashed. People shouted at each other, trying to hear their friends over the noise. The smell of alcohol and too many bodies reminded Debra of why she made a point to avoid these places. She made her way past the main party and found the conference room where David, the owner of Silver Script Ad Agency, had snagged a spot. The idea to do a New Year's party had been a last-minute thing, and most of the event centers in the city were booked. He had invited all the clients from the past year, and by the look of it, most of them had made a point to show up. Debra scanned the room and found Aaron near the back laughing with a group of friends. After a quick hello to other employees, she made her way over to where Aaron stood. "Hey." She nodded at the other people in the group before accepting a drink from a waiter. "It's packed in here." Aaron laughed. "I think you could say that about the entire city. I'm glad you made it. I was worried you would work all night." "I didn't have to. You did a great job with the designs." Debra sipped her drink, wincing at the bitterness. She should have just gone with water. "Thank you. So you've met Jake and Carissa. This is her husband, Matt. And this is Lance Walker from Walker Apparel." Debra's breath caught when she met Lance's green eyes. She'd communicated with him over email and on the phone about his clothing line, but they'd never met face to face. She'd had too many projects she was overseeing and had turned this one over to Aaron and Carissa. Now she wished she had been more involved. Not that she wanted anything to happen. She'd given up on love a long time ago. "So this is the mysterious Debra. Aaron and Carissa have raved about how much you taught both of them. It's nice to finally meet you." His smile showed a dimple in his left cheek, and it made Debra go weak in the knees. Debra forced out a laugh. "While I'd love to take the praise, most of the credit goes to them. They surpassed what I taught them long ago." "Don't listen to her. She's amazing." Aaron picked up a drink from the tray that was offered and thanked the waiter. "Well, it's nice to meet you, Debra. Please excuse me. I need to go say hi to an old friend." He held out his hand and she took it, impressed by his firm grip. "I'll see you later." Debra stared after him until she caught Aaron and Carissa giggling. Aaron cleared her throat. "You should see your face right now. Talk about a schoolgirl crush. What? No. I mean, yes, he's attractive, but you know I'm not interested in dating anymore. Deborah glanced around to see where he'd gone. She told herself she just wanted to make sure he was being helped, but the flutter in her stomach betrayed her. Right, neither was I. Aaron looked up at Jake and smiled. Deborah chuckled. Fair enough. I'm going to go get something to eat and make the rounds. See you in a bit. He's over by the drinks, Aaron called out. Deborah shook her head and went in the opposite direction. Nate stepped in front of her, blocking the way. His cologne was too strong, as usual, and he wore his I could talk your ear off expression. She forced herself to smile. Hey, Nate. Hey, Deborah, I'm surprised to see you here. Nate took a drink from his glass. I finished what I was working on. Besides, I promised Aaron I would come, so here I am. Deborah glanced at Nate's date. She was a cute blonde girl who looked like she would rather be anywhere else besides talking to a bunch of business people. He most likely grabbed her on the way to the party so he wouldn't be alone. How was your Christmas? Nate made a face. I've had better. Our pipes froze and we had to spend the day with blow dryers on them. Hate it when that happens. I had to keep one sink at a slow trickle so it wouldn't do that. Deborah's old landlord had been terrible at getting in to do the repairs, so she'd figured out how to do most of them on her own. Nate made a face. Yeah, I tried that, but Roger likes to turn it off as he's leaving. The whole saving the earth thing. Never mind the lack of water when it freezes. I think it's time to get a place of my own. Deborah noticed the girl checking out one of the younger guys at the party. Nate would be lucky if she didn't ditch him before midnight. That might be wise. Well, you two have a great time. I'm going to find something to eat. It was nice to meet you. Katie. The blonde smiled and turned away, checking out yet another guy. Poor Nate. He really needed to find someone who appreciated him. Deborah found the dessert table and picked up a plate. The caterers had gone all out with the food. Finger sandwiches, crackers with crab or other toppings, hors d'oeuvres, and trays filled with cakes, cupcakes, and brownies. She picked out some crackers and sandwiches, then grabbed some celery and carrot sticks. Ah, good choice with the crackers. The crab is perfect. Lance stood behind Deborah with his plate. His voice sent a thrill through her. I have to admit, I've already had several of them. Thanks for the recommendation. She picked up a napkin and glass of water, trying to appear calm. It was irritating how flustered she'd become around someone she'd just met. Lance took a few of the crackers along with some cake. There are tables in the back. We can sit together if you'd like. Sure. Deborah reminded herself to breathe as she followed Lance through the crowd. This was just eating a snack together. She avoided looking in Aaron's direction, positive that she and Carissa were watching her and laughing. Does this work for you? Lance set his plate down. Deborah put her plate next to his. It's great. Lance pulled her chair out for her and then sat down. Thanks for sitting with me. I know some of these people, but it was getting a little overwhelming. I know the feeling. She took a bite of the cracker and savored the taste of the crab salad. They'd picked the perfect herbs and sauce for it. See? It's like a burst of heaven for your senses. Lance popped one from his plate into his mouth. Deborah smiled and finished the rest of the cracker. You're right. So I take it you're not into big parties? I don't mind them for a while, but then I like to hide back in my office. Fashion shows must be torture for you then, all those people staring at you? Deborah smiled at a couple who walked past. She recognized them from a commercial she'd worked on a few months before. Those aren't so bad. I usually hide in the back and run things there, and let my assistants do the MC part. He wiped his mouth. Besides, I like to make sure everything is just perfect before I let the model up on the stage. I can understand that. Oh, and your ads were approved and sent on to the magazines. I did it just before coming tonight. Thank you. I was so impressed with the layouts. You do amazing work. Erin does. I just oversee everything. Even as she waved off the compliment, she mentally cheered at his words. Laughter erupted in the center of the room where David stood with a group of people. He kept Lily close by as he always did, with an arm around her. They look beautiful together, don't they? Lance asked. Yes, they do. Deborah couldn't help the twinge of jealousy, but she knew David and Lily needed each other. Maybe that's what made her so envious. I think it's really sweet that you helped with Lily's dress. Lance laughed. Thanks. It gave my assistants something to do before Christmas, and they loved it. I have to admit that it was for selfish reasons. Getting David Fleshman to wear one of my suits was a huge deal for Walker Apparel. True, but I still think it's incredibly sweet of you. She positively glowed at the Christmas party. Besides, he came to you. That says a lot about your company as well. Deborah took a drink. Have you talked to him yet? I'm sure he'd want to say hi. Lance shook his head. No, I haven't. There are too many people over there. Ah, right. I need to say hello as well. We can go together if you'd like. Deborah couldn't believe she was doing this, but he was a client and she was just helping him out. At least that's what she told herself as she stood and smoothed out her dress. He stood. Thanks. It must look pretty bad when I can't even go talk to someone by myself. I have to admit, that man intimidates me. He's harmless. Besides, you're big enough in the clothing industry that people should be intimidated by you. So own it, or at least pretend you do. Deborah led the way, conscious of how close he was as they had to push their way through the crowd. David acknowledged that they'd joined the group and finished his story. Hey, Deborah. Hey, Mr. Walker. I'm so glad you both came. Lance held out his hand and David shook it. Thanks for the invite. It got me out of the office for the night. David laughed. That's what I like to hear. All work and no play and all that. Yeah, I get it. Lance joined in the laughter. How'd you manage to book this place? Everything within blocks of Times Square is usually booked for months. I know a guy. Oh, hey, the noisemakers are here. Everyone grab one. David took the box from one of his assistants and started handing them out. We only have about 10 minutes left. Deborah took the hat and noisemaker she was handed and gave them to Lance, then took some for herself. She hadn't worn a party hat for years, but joined the rest of the group as they wore theirs. These people were like family, and Lance was an added bonus to the evening. The music switched to a slow song, and several couples went to the middle of the floor to dance. Deborah caught herself swaying to the music as she watched them. Lance leaned in, and his voice tickled her ear. Would you care to dance? The ball is about to drop, so this is our one chance. Deborah debated saying no since they'd just met, but she loved the song and she was itching to dance. It had been too long. Lance took her hand and led her out to the dance floor. Lance smiled down at her, making her heart skip a beat. I haven't danced in a while, so go easy on me. I warn you that I haven't danced for a while, so you might go home with sore feet. She moved along with his steps as if they were one, but it took all of her concentration to do it. The feel of his arm tightly around her waist made her stomach do flip-flops. Lance twirled Deborah around and pulled her back in. Let me guess, you took ballroom dance your entire life. She laughed. No, but I was a fast learner in college. I spent a lot of my weekends at dance halls to take a break from my classes. Well, if you're ever sick of advertising, you have a career to fall back on. The song ended and Lance dipped Deborah before pulling her back up. He stared down into her eyes until everyone cheered and clapped. They pulled away from each other, and Deborah suddenly realized that everyone had been staring at them. She curtsied, earning a laugh from the crowd before they went back to their conversations. I'm going to go get a drink. Would you like one? Lance asked. Sure. Deborah walked to the side of the dance floor so she wouldn't get in the way of the other dancers. What she actually wanted was to keep dancing. Aaron walked over to her. You didn't tell me you could dance. I'm impressed. It doesn't come up much at work, Deborah laughed. Lance came up behind Aaron and handed Deborah a glass of water. His hand brushed hers, sending a shiver up her arm. Sorry, they were saving the champagne for after midnight. Water's fine, thank you. She took a sip just as the big screen TV turned on to show the ball drop. Instead of setting the cup down, she hurried to finish it. Someone bumped into her, and she choked on the water as it went down the wrong tube. She coughed, trying to breathe past the water, but she couldn't. Aaron and Jake were busy counting down the last minute to midnight and couldn't hear her. Lance patted Deborah on the back. Hey, are you okay? She took another drink, hoping it would calm things down, and she was able to finally breathe, even though the coughs wouldn't stop. Lance continued to pat her back to help clear her airway. When the coughs finally subsided, she looked up to thank him and got lost in his eyes. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Happy New Year! The crowd called together. As couples around them kissed and shouted in celebration, Deborah stared at the man in front of her. She almost wanted him to lean forward and kiss her. It was only 2 inches at the most. Hey, Deborah, could you help out over here? David called. He had champagne in his hand, pouring glasses for everyone around him. She cleared her throat as the moment shattered. Of course. What was she thinking? She'd just met the man that night. True, they'd talked over email, but it was business. As David handed out glasses, Deborah handed him another one to fill. Lily stood on the other side with another bottle. Why the caterers weren't doing this was beyond Deborah, but it helped clear her mind. Lance stood with Aaron and Jake, laughing at something Jake had said. Was he waiting for her? She wasn't sure, but she didn't know if she was ready to find out either. When the last glass was handed out, Deborah took one over for Lance, but he had already left. Oh, where did Lance go? She asked, trying not to feel disappointed. He told me to tell you he was sorry, but he got an urgent call and had to take off. Aaron grabbed Deborah's arm. You two were fantastic out there on the dance floor. I'm pretty sure I saw some sparks fly. Deborah laughed. It was just a dance. But I admit there may have been a spark or two. More than just two. Anyway, Jake and I need to get home. I'll see you at work on Thursday. See you then. I'm heading out too. I want to get out of here before everyone else in New York tries to use the subway. Deborah waved and went to get her bag and coat from the closet. Even though she knew Lance had left, she couldn't help watching for him as she made her way through the crowds outside. Many still stood and cheered, but the stairs to the subway were filled with others who were trying to rush to get home. The station was packed, like she'd expected. She probably could have walked home, but there were too many partiers out on the streets and she didn't want to be out there alone. Besides, she'd been down here plenty of times when it was busy. She climbed on and smiled at the couple next to her, and had to scoot close so several more people could squeeze in. The trip to the Upper East Side wasn't usually too bad, but with the amount of people coming and going, it took longer than usual. She took a deep breath when she finally pushed her way out of the train. She'd been forced to breathe sour perfume and body odor for several stops, and the stale air of the station was welcoming. After pulling her coat tighter around her, she hurried up the steps and walked the block to her building. She fumbled with her keys in the icy cold and walked inside. The black and white tiles and paintings on the wall in the entryway welcomed her. This was a vast improvement from her last place. Her mom had insisted that she start acting like a top executive and find a better place. Thanks to the bonus from David, she was able to put a down payment on her dream apartment. She took the elevator and unlocked her door. Happy New Year, her neighbor called from down the hallway. Happy New Year, how's your father? Deborah asked. Sandy's dad had been hospitalized for a stroke just after Christmas. Sandy smiled. He's fine. He'll be coming home in a couple of days. It's so much better than we'd expected. That's wonderful. Deborah opened her door. I'll see you tomorrow. Sandy waved as Deborah walked into her apartment. Without the lights on, she could see the New York skyline through the large windows in the living room. It was the reason she wanted this place for her own. She started a pot on the stove and changed into pajamas. Once the water boiled, she made herself a cup of hot chocolate and curled up on the couch to watch It's a Wonderful Life. Even though it was a Christmas movie, her family had watched it New Year's Eve for as long as she could remember. The movie was only half over when she pulled the thick fleece blanket over her and closed her eyes. Thoughts of Lance ran through her mind. At 35, and after too many broken relationships, she had given up on dating. She enjoyed her job, so it was easy to bury herself in it. But maybe it wasn't too late. Chapter 2. Lance ended the call and shoved his phone into his pocket on the way back into the party. The crowd had left, and he was disappointed to see that Deborah had left as well. Not that he blamed her. If Erin told her the call was urgent, she'd understand that it could take hours. Oh, hey, Lance. I thought you'd already left. David came over and shook his hand. Lily's arm was threaded through his, and she looked radiant in her green party dress. I was on a call. I guess I didn't escape work after all, he chuckled. Thanks again for inviting me. I had a great time. You're welcome. David reached out to shake his hand. I'll see you later. Lily held out her hand and Lance took it. You really didn't have to send me this dress, but I appreciate it. My pleasure. And you look beautiful in it. Thank you, she blushed. We need to get going. Our babysitter is probably worn out after keeping up with the kids. Lance walked toward the door with them and they parted ways as they left the building. His car was a couple of blocks away near his office. The wind was cold, so he pulled his gloves on and walked quickly through the streets. He just hoped he'd be able to get to his house before the snow came down. Several people stopped him to wish him a Happy New Year, and he'd smile and say it back. The parking garage kept the wind out, but it didn't block the cold as Lance climbed into his Mercedes. He started it and rubbed his hands together to gain some feeling in his fingers. Once the car had warmed up a little, he left the garage and headed for his house on Staten Island. Traffic moved slow, and Lance allowed his mind to wander back to the party. He'd planned to make an appearance and leave, but then Debra had shown up. While they'd written emails back and forth about specifics for the clothing ads, he'd never actually met her. She was beautiful, with her auburn hair that fell in waves and those hazel eyes that held him captivated. Asking her to dance was something he normally wouldn't do, but something about her entranced him. And man, could she dance. Horns honked around him, and Lance realized he was sitting still at a green light. He moved forward and continued toward the bridge. Large, flashing signs warned drivers of the ice that could form on the bridge, so he stayed the same speed as the traffic around him, instead of weaving through it like he normally did. It was nearly 3 in the morning by the time he finally pulled into his driveway. There had been an accident that backed up traffic for a while. The snow had waited until he was only a couple of miles from home, so he was thankful for that. He dropped his bag next to the door and changed for bed. He took his laptop to bed with him and checked his email. Deborah's name appeared with an email from Silver Script Ad Agency. He was happy to see that the ads had been accepted for the new season, but it was seeing her name that helped put a smile on his face as he fell asleep. New Year's Day brought nearly a foot of snow and shut down the roads into the city. Lance used the day to take down his Christmas tree and the decorations. He'd only put them up because he wanted to have them ready in case his parents came home for the holidays. Not that he didn't enjoy them, it brought back memories from growing up. But since he spent the majority of time at his office, he didn't see them much. Lance had been invited to a few football parties that day, but the event the night before had almost been too much. He hadn't been exaggerating when he said that social situations stress him out. He decided it was a good day to do the chores in the house that he knew needed to be done. By early afternoon, the faucets were tightened, the pantry had been cleaned out, and all the linens in the house were being washed. Lance sat down with a cup of coffee and his laptop to work on a new line. Winter had been a success and he wanted it to keep going. Spring was coming soon, but he had a few new ideas for some gowns and cocktail dresses for Valentine's Day to add to the rest of the collection. He hoped to catch the eye of a few celebrities for when award show season started up. After David and Lily had worn his tux and gown for the Christmas party, he'd received a few calls, and he wanted to keep that going. The dress for Lily was one of many outfits in the same collection, and he hoped she'd agree to model it in the upcoming show. They made it specifically for her. He searched several sites and pulled up past lines of his own designs. There were a few promising ideas, but he would tweak the collars and add more pastel colors. It was near midnight when he looked up at the clock. He'd spent hours drawing new gowns, suits, and outerwear, and hadn't stopped to eat. He set his pencil down and stood to stretch. Once he had dinner, he'd scan the images in and send them over to Deborah. He studied a picture of an evening gown that touched the floor. It was black and made with a satin in a form-fitting column style. He would decide on the sleeves later, but he leaned toward one shoulder. The parties had been missed, but Lance was pleased with the work he'd been able to get done that day. He could work on a proposal and get it sent over to Deborah in the morning. The thought of inviting her to discuss it over lunch came to mind, but he pushed it away. It had been a great night, but he had no idea if she thought anything of it. Once they got the advertising contract underway, he could ask to meet again. The roads were clear by morning, which Lance was thankful for. He straightened his tie and grabbed his bag from the counter. His breakfast consisted of a green smoothie that he drank quickly so he wouldn't have to taste it. His resolution for the year was to eat healthier, but he wasn't sure how long it would last. The trip into the city was fairly smooth, and Lance got to his office before most of his employees. Many of them joked that he spent the nights there, not that he hadn't ever done it before. Lance's assistant, Nikki, walked into his office with the pile of mail and her clipboard. "Hey, Lance, you have a message about those bolts of taffeta you wanted. They can be here next week, no sooner, and they only have a few colors in right now. And Anthony Rossetti called about getting us into the fashion show in February. He said to email him your details, so I went ahead and did that for you and let him know you might have more. And Aaron Tyler called to let you know that the magazine ads went out first thing this morning. And I think that's about it. Thanks. I have a few more designs I want you to go over before I send them to Anthony and Aaron. And as long as I can get some reds and blues in the taffeta, I'm good. Oh, and maybe some peach. I think that'll be great for the spring line." Lance took the mail from Nikki and flipped through it as she left to do what he'd said. Most were invites to shows that wanted him to come, which he would accept. Nikki and Ella did a fantastic job with the shows, and it saved him time for the huge shows here in New York, when they could get him out of the office. He smiled when he saw the orders for the award shows. 3 actresses wanted gowns as soon as possible for the Golden Globe Awards. Those were cutting it close, but he could probably have them done. Lance pulled out the designs he'd worked on the night before and studied them. It always took a few glances at the pictures before he knew if he really liked them or not. They were still strong, although he wanted to change one of the cocktail dresses. It would be perfect for around Valentine's Day, but it needed something near the waistline, a flower or something. He set it aside and left his office with the designs. Ella and Nikki stood with a few of their models as they pinned up the hems. They turned and the models stepped off their pedestals. Usually he would have the models leave if it was something big, but he'd been waiting for these gowns to get here for a week or two and wasn't about to delay the delivery. "Finish what you're doing. Those need to get out today." He walked closer to inspect the material. "When did these get in?" "Just now. Most of them look good, but these needed to be adjusted," Nikki said through pursed lips where she held several straight pins. Lance moved over to the rack of gowns and went through them. "Where are the royal blue gowns? We had 5 ordered." Ella stood straight. "We didn't see any, and there was no note. I left a message, but haven't heard back." "Great. Those are the ones they wanted the most." Lance ran his fingers through his hair. Nikki suddenly took the pins out of her mouth and ran out of the room. Lance continued studying the gowns as he waited. Usually, when she did something like this, it was because she'd had a stroke of brilliance. It was the main reason she was one of his top employees. Ella finished with the dress and moved on to the next model. "So, did you actually leave your office on New Year's Eve?" "Yes, I went to a party." Lance chuckled at Ella's look of surprise. Ella shook her head and had the model turn around so she could work on the back. "Like, a party where actual people were?" "I was invited to the Silver Script party. It was tempting just to go home, but I figured people should see me every once in a while so they don't think I'm dead." Lance found some ribbon to put together a flower for one of the dresses. The neckline was too bare how it was. His fingers moved without needing to think about what he was doing. Ella stared at him. "Wow, I'm impressed. So did you hide in a corner or something?" "As much as I'd wanted to, no. I talked to Aaron Tyler and a few other people. Deborah in particular, but he didn't add that." He grabbed a few pins and attached the flower to a red satin dress. The black was just enough to make it pop. Perfect. "Oh, that looks better. I've been trying to decide what it needed." Ella straightened out the skirt she'd been working on and moved to the next model. "Erin doesn't count because she's engaged. Did you talk to any other women?" Lance laughed. You're hopeless. Yes, I did. I talked to Lily when I talked to David. She loved the dress, by the way. Oh, and Deborah Thomas. What's this about Deborah? Nikki dropped a large box onto the floor and coughed as a cloud of dust lifted off the lid. Our dear Lance went to the Silver Script ad party and actually talked to people. Ella smiled at the model as she climbed down and went to the dressing room to change. She walked over to the box Dickie had brought up. What's this? I had to go down to storage just before Christmas and found an old box of dresses that we'd put away who knows how long ago. Nikki lifted the lid and pulled out gowns that had been wrapped in plastic. They're out of style now, but I bet we could fix them up pretty quick. Lance took the dress from her and held it out. It was royal blue with ruffles down the hem. Definitely not in style. But he could make it work. Let's do it. Have everyone try these on and we can get to work. Ella hurried to the back with an armful of gowns while Nikki and Lance went through the rest of the box. A couple of the dresses had stains and went to the trash, but they found a few others that had promise. So, how was the party? Nikki asked as she pulled out her scissors. And by party, I mean Deborah. Lance glanced up quickly and turned away without saying anything. Ha! I knew it! You like her! Nikki laughed. Lance shook his head. Nikki was hopeless. She'd wanted to set him up for months. The ring on Nikki's finger had turned her into an instant matchmaker because she wanted everyone else just as happy as she was. She'd actually tried to set him up with Ella at one point, but both Ella and Lance had vetoed the idea immediately. I barely know her. Lance could feel his face burn. Ah, here we go. The models trailed in one by one and stood up on the pedestals. Lance walked around each of them, coming up with ways to make the dresses work for what he needed. The colors were perfect. Lance rattled off what needed to be done to each while his assistants jotted everything down in a notebook. Once it was all decided, they allowed the models to leave and pulled out the mannequins. It would be much easier to make the adjustments on them. Tailors came in to take over, and Lance went back to his office. He pulled out the drawings and made a few changes he'd thought of as he worked on the other gowns. Once he was done, he scanned them and sent copies off to Deborah and Anthony. The fashion show wasn't too far away, and he was anxious to get started on advertising. Chapter 3. Deborah twisted on her chair, tapping her fingers to the song playing on her computer. It was a new jingle written for a Super Bowl commercial. The tune was catchy, but the words weren't quite right. She told her writers several times that it needed some adjusting, but it still wasn't flowing for her. Her computer pinged with a new email, giving her a welcome break from the song. She could go back to it later, or see if Aaron or Carissa could come up with something. It was an email from Lance. Deborah couldn't help the small flutter in her stomach as she opened the message. Several pictures were attached to the email, along with ideas for commercials. But then, down at the bottom, he signed his name and added how much he'd enjoyed the party with her. Deborah grinned at the message. So, he'd also felt something that night. After several attempts at a return email, she gave up and decided just to go through the attachments he'd sent. The dress ideas were gorgeous. It would be easy to create an ad for them. The dresses practically sold themselves. She wrote a quick email back, letting him know his ideas for the ads would work wonderfully, and hesitated before mentioning that she'd enjoyed the evening as well. It was just courteous to say that back, right? She sent the email before thinking twice and lifted her phone to call Aaron and Carissa into her office. While she waited for them to come, Deborah started arranging the ad to give each dress the best exposure. A short knock was followed by Aaron and Carissa coming into the office. Aaron walked around Deborah's desk. These are the dresses? Wow, he outdid himself, didn't he? Carissa leaned forward. Man, I should have had him design my dress. Do you recognize this one? Deborah pointed her mouse at a green dress on the screen. It looks familiar, but Erin narrowed her eyes, studying the screen. It looks like the one Lily wore at the party. He's wanting to get her into the show if it's possible. Deborah laughed. It'll take a miracle. After all the press she's had, I'm guessing she'll be hiding out in her house. Erin rubbed her chin as she stared at the screen. I think she just needs the right coaxing. She has the perfect body for it, like it was made just for her, which wouldn't surprise me at all. Me neither. Deborah rearranged a few of the pictures. What do you think? Erin nodded. I think it'll be great. We should be able to roll this out pretty quickly. Do you want us to take over? The chocolate commercials finished shooting today, and Smith's and Jewelers will be done by the end of next week. I'll take care of this one. I have something else for you two. She pulled up the jingle. This has been driving me crazy. I need you to figure out how to fix it. Erin listened for a moment. They have a few extra words where they don't need to be. Send it over and we can work on it. When do you need it? Deborah smiled. She knew they'd figure it out. They want it ready to air for the Super Bowl, but it has to get recorded, so I'd say by Monday? Got it. Erin stood and walked to the door, humming the tune. We're heading out for lunch and then we'll work on the commercial. Do you want anything? Grab me a sandwich if you get a chance. Deborah smiled as they left and turned back to the ad. She wanted it just perfect before sending back a sample. Deborah stared at the computer screen as she waited to hear back from Lance. She'd sent the proofs back an hour before, but hadn't heard anything. The knock at the door made her jump. She swiveled in her chair. Come in. Nate poked his head into her office. Hey, I have those numbers for the Super Bowl commercial. Oh, wonderful, thank you. Deborah wiped her hands and took the folder from him. She flipped through the numbers and nodded at each of the totals. They were right on with the estimates, so she signed it off and handed back the folder. These are great. Pass them on and we'll see what they say. Thanks. I wasn't sure the studio would cave on the fees, but we managed to convince them it was a good idea. Looks like the filming could start next Monday, if they approve it. Deborah smiled up at him. Perfect. Was there anything else you needed? Nope. Not unless you know of an apartment. The frozen pipes cracked and flowed into the apartment below. And, of course, we're getting blamed for it. Nate sighed. I knew I should have moved out when I had the chance. I'm sorry. Maybe my old apartment is still available. It's not the best, but it's better than what you have now. Deborah grabbed a scrap of paper and wrote out a number. Here's my landlord's name. Play nice, and he'll be putty in your hands. Nate smirked and took the note from Deborah. I always play nice. Thanks for this. I owe you. We'll see what you think after you check out the place. She laughed as he grinned and left the office. Her phone rang, so she picked it up. Silver Script Ad Agency, Deborah speaking. Deborah? Hi, this is Lance. The deep, rich voice sent thrills through Deborah, making her forget how to speak for a moment. Hey, Lance, is there something I can do for you? She cringed at the formality, but she had no clue what else to say. Socializing at a party was totally different than talking on the phone at work. She pushed away the nervousness. He was a client, and she had sent him some mock-ups to look through. That was it. There was a short silence before Lance spoke again. These ads look fantastic. I wondered if you would like to get some dinner while we talk about some options for the commercial. Deborah jerked and pulled her phone away from her to stare at it. Had he just asked her out? No, it was just a business dinner. She fought down the excitement. She could cheer once she figured out what was going on. Of course. What time works for you? Well, I just finished up what I needed to get done for tonight and thought maybe we could go in the next half hour or so. He paused. Unless you need more time? Deborah glanced at the classifieds on her computer. That's great. I'll collect my things. Do you have anything in mind for a restaurant? Nothing fancy, somewhere low-key where we can talk easily. I'll meet you at the agency and we can figure something out. How does that sound? Perfect. I'll look around for some places in the area. Deborah pulled up a list of restaurants nearby. She didn't eat out much, but Erin did. Maybe she'd have a recommendation. Wonderful. I'll see you in a few. Lance hung up and Deborah set her phone on the cradle. Elation, giddiness, and nervousness warred in Deborah's stomach. It was just a business meeting. That's it. She could do this. Thoughts of the dance that night and the feel of his arms around her overpowered the attempt to remain calm. She stood and pulled open the cupboard where she kept a small mirror, brush, and makeup. It was important to look good for the clients who came into the office, and tonight she was thankful for it. She touched up her makeup and brushed through her hair. Hey, Deborah, I have those. Wait, do we have a meeting I don't know about? Erin stood in the doorway with wide eyes. Deborah set down the brush and turned, her face burning. No, I'm going to a business dinner. Uh-huh. So, why are you wearing lipstick? Erin set the files on Deborah's desk and folded her arms. Does this business dinner have something to do with a guy? Trust Erin to notice. Yes, it happens to be Lance, and I need some advice. I knew it. I knew you two liked each other, Erin grinned. What advice? Kissing? Deborah rolled her eyes. Hardly. He's coming over here and asked about a good place to eat. You're usually the one who grabs my lunch. Erin tapped her chin, her eyes dancing. Let's see. Romantic, but not too romantic, and good for business. Not romantic, just good for business. Deborah leaned forward to click on the list of restaurants. Which of these places are good? I'd avoid most of them because of the dinner rush. I think your best bet is this diner across the street, or this diner that's closer to my apartment. Both are fantastic, and both have a quiet atmosphere. Deborah stared at the two diners. I think we'll go closer. You're sure this place is good? I've only eaten there a couple of times with Carissa. Usually we just grab something in the cafe next to it so we can get back to the office. But I like the food, and the atmosphere has a homey romance edge to it. Thank you. And I'll look over the files you brought me tonight. Deborah put the envelope with the ad mock-ups into her bag and slung it over her shoulder. Erin waved it off. That can wait. I want you to enjoy your date. Business dinner. Deborah shut down her computer. She pushed the excitement down, wanting Erin to be right. But as he'd wanted to talk about the files, it was nothing more than a client meeting, right? Erin laughed and walked toward the door. Call it what you want, but it's totally a date. Deborah's office phone buzzed. Mr. Walker is here to see you. Thanks, Sarah. Deborah took a deep breath and straightened her dress, then turned off the light and shut the door. She could do this. Chapter 4. Lance tapped his laptop bag nervously as he waited for Deborah to meet him in the lobby. He'd told himself several times that he shouldn't expect anything from this dinner, except maybe some great ads for his company. That was until Deborah stepped out of the elevator. Her hair was just as perfect as it had been at the party, and the way the dress hugged her body made his heart race just a little more. She'd chosen a dark red lipstick, and it accented her beautiful smile. He couldn't help checking his tie one more time before stepping forward to shake her hand. The zing he'd felt during the dance was still there, as her small hand gripped his firmly. Thanks again for meeting with me. I hope I didn't ruin any of your plans. She laughed. No, I'm glad you called. I'd been planning to go home to eat leftovers on my couch. That sounds just as exciting as my night would have been. Why did he just say that? He'd insulted her and told her he was boring, all in the same sentence. So, where are we headed? Erin told me about a diner that's across the street. Will that work? Otherwise, we could try somewhere else. I believe a new Italian place just opened up a few blocks away. The diner sounds perfect. I'd like some good comfort food. He waited for her to put her coat on and followed her out of the office. The sidewalks were slick, and while he'd noticed Deborah wore boots, he still kept a hand out just in case she slipped. Deborah stopped at the stoplight and pushed the button. She shivered and smiled up at him. Maybe we should have ordered dinner at my office instead. He laughed. It would have been warmer for sure. We can go back if you'd like. The light changed just then, and they got lost in the crowd as they filed across the intersection. Lance put his hand on Deborah's back as they walked, so he wouldn't lose her, and let go as soon as they were across. The diner is just over here. Deborah stood to the side to let a few people pass and then walked down the block a few yards. She moved to open the door, but Lance reached forward and opened it for her. Here you go. He cringed when he saw the slight, annoyed look on her face. So, she wasn't one who liked having him open the door for her. Lance took in the small diner as they waited to be seated. This is a nice place. I can see why Aaron suggested it. Deborah nodded. She has great taste. The waitress showed them to a table, and Lance held the chair out for Deborah, then sat down. Lance refrained from shaking his head when he noticed her pursed lips. He was already messing this up just by trying to be a gentleman. He took the menu he was handed and glanced through it. The food was exactly what he'd been hoping for. Man, it all sounds so good. Deborah stared down at her menu. Do you know what you want? No, but I was thinking the steak and baked potato. So much for his diet, but this was business. Have you decided yet? Deborah closed her menu. I think I'll have their soup and salad. It's so cold out there, I need something to warm me up. When the waiter came by, they put in their orders and waited for him to pour them each some water before moving on to the next table. So, how'd things go today? You guys have that fashion show coming up soon, right? Deborah picked up her glass and took a drink. Pretty good. We got some last minute orders, so that made things a little crazy, but you'll be ready. Then I can concentrate on this line a little more. I love the dresses, but there are a couple of things on the men's jackets that I'm not sure I like yet. Lance was relieved that Deborah went straight to business. Even though he wanted to learn everything about her, at least this way they had something to break the ice. Well, the designs you sent over are brilliant. I can't wait to see what they're like when they come to life. Her smile lit up her face, sending a thrill through Lance. I can't imagine how you come up with so many beautiful designs over and over again. It's quite amazing. Lance laughed. I have help with some of it. They're not all of my designs, but I have the final say with what we do. A lot of the time I'll tweak them, but it's kind of the same thing you do. I create clothing in ways that allow people to express themselves. You create your ads in ways that appeal to people to buy them. If we didn't have both, the clothes would go nowhere. Deborah unrolled her napkin and laid it out on her lap. I guess that's true, but I still say it takes more to design the actual clothing. Fair enough, but a lot of the time, it just feels like playing. Add a bow here, a splash of color there, buttons or zippers. I get lost in the work and forget to eat a lot of the time. Lance stopped, embarrassed by his passion for designing. It's usually where his date lost interest and decided not to go out for a second time. So I'm not the only one who gets lost in work. That's a relief to hear. Aaron has to bring me lunch so I'll actually eat. Deborah paused. Although, now that I think about it, David is also guilty of it as well. Relief washed over Lance. Maybe that's why I've never done lunch with David. We're pretty good friends, but neither of us can get away. Their meals came, and Lance thanked the waitress before picking up his fork and knife. Let's see if this tastes anywhere near as good as it smells. Deborah glanced at his plate. I may have chosen the wrong meal. Lance chuckled and took a bite of his steak. It nearly melted in his mouth. It was cooked to perfection, and the seasoning they'd used accented the meat perfectly. His baked potato had just the right amount of butter and sour cream. It took him back to summers on the ranch with his grandma. You look like you're in heaven. Deborah's eyes danced as she sipped her tomato soup. I'm pretty sure I am. This is perfect. He hesitated before cutting a small piece off. Want to try a bite? You have no idea. She leaned back so he could slide the steak off his fork onto her plate. She took a bite of it and closed her eyes. Oh, you weren't kidding. Lance cut off another piece for her and then one for him. How is your soup? Fantastic. Not as mouthwatering as your steak, but still very good. I finally feel like I've thawed out. She looked down at it. I'd share, but it's a little harder than sharing your steak. I'm fine. Tomatoes and I don't always agree. That was an understatement. He'd hated tomatoes since he was young and had eaten too many of his grandma's. The rest of the meal was quiet as they enjoyed the dinner in front of them. Lance's mind wandered between the woman in front of him and the designs that were fighting to come out onto paper. The retro feel had given him some ideas for the upcoming show, and he wanted to get them drawn before he lost the inspiration. His fingers moved themselves as he shaped the napkin into a flowing dress. It wasn't until he reached for his fork to use as a model that he realized Deborah was staring at him. He dropped the napkin and took a drink of water to hide his burning face. Sorry about that, he coughed. Don't be sorry. You obviously had something in mind. Perhaps we should go? She folded her napkin on the table. He shook his head. I'm fine. We can talk about the account first, and then I can work on this once I get home. Deborah studied him for a moment before pulling out a folder. Here's what you sent to me, and I came up with a few ideas for what we can do. If we don't have time for any commercials, these ads should work great splashed across all the fashion magazines and catalogs. I highly recommend finding some big names to wear your clothing out in public, like you've done before. And then the show is a must. Lance pulled out a pen and looked through the pictures. He made small notes as he went. Some for him so he knew what he wanted to fix, and others for Deborah so she'd know which gowns would complement each other better. When he was done, he handed them back. I hope you don't mind my notes. Of course not. I want to make sure this works for you. Would you like a copy of these as well? I can fax them, or you can run up with me to the office to make a copy tonight. She rifled through them, smiling at some of the notes and nodding at others. These are great suggestions, although with this overcoat and this gown, I'd like to keep them here. While I see what you mean, I think it's a better suggestion for men who are looking for the perfect dress for their Valentine. Lance stared at the picture in front of him and considered the outcome. She had a point. This was one of the gowns that would be made of a cheaper cotton and would appeal to more people. He finally nodded. I like it. Let's do it your way. And if you don't mind, I'd like those copies tonight. I had a few tweaks I want to do before tomorrow so we can get started on the sewing. Deborah put the file back into her bag and pulled out her wallet. Let's do that. I need to grab my laptop anyway. Lance put his hand over hers. Dinner's on me. I asked you to come with me, so I would like to pay. She clenched her jaw before finally agreeing. I'm not used to gentlemen, I'm sorry. Then you've been around the wrong men. He pulled out his wallet and took the receipt up to pay. He left a generous tip and put his hand on Deborah's back as they made their way out of the diner. The temperature had dropped dramatically while they were inside, and Lance hoped the snow would wait until he got back home. Otherwise, he'd be spending the night in his office. Lance stood back while Deborah typed her ID into the pen pad and turned the lock. A burst of warm air welcomed them into the office as they walked inside and headed straight for the elevator. He'd only been in this building a couple of times, but he was always impressed at how sharp they kept everything. When they got to the right floor, Lance followed Deborah into her office. He was used to going into the conference room, and it felt strange to go anywhere else. She kept everything neat, and the pictures on the wall were cityscapes, awards the agency had won, and some of the ads that she had apparently worked on. He stepped closer to one of them, recognizing the model they'd used. Isn't that Erin? He asked. You didn't hear about that? The jeweler thought she and Jake had better chemistry than the actress they'd hired, and chose her instead. Turns out he was right. They're getting married at Christmas. Deborah pulled the papers out of her bag and warmed the copier up. Lance nodded and moved on to the next ad. This one was an ad for his company that they had done for Christmas. It had helped pull in a lot of new customers, including the wedding party they had finished earlier that day. Deborah stepped next to him. I just had this one hung yesterday. Erin has one in her office as well. You all did a great job with it. This was one shoot he'd actually made it to, and it had gone better than he'd expected. We had a great line to work with, she smiled and handed him a file folder with his pictures and notes. Here you go. Lance took them and put them in his laptop bag. Thank you. I'll have something to work on over the weekend. That sounds like an exciting weekend, she laughed. I will be squeezing work in between a family party and my nephew's hockey game. Oh, that's great. I used to play when I was in high school. How old's your nephew? He's 10, but he's been playing since he was 5. Because he's the only boy among 3 sisters, his dad wants to make sure he's tough, she laughed. Lance grinned. Sounds about right. I'm the only son as well. My sisters hated that I usually got what I wanted. Deborah looked up at him. So are they the reason you got into fashion? Pretty much. They dressed me up all the time since I was the youngest. One is off in Paris, and I only see her during the fashion week there. My other sister is off sewing clothes in a shelter in Africa somewhere. She married a guy who convinced her to join the Peace Corps, and they've been there ever since. Lance hadn't meant to tell her so much. It was the way her eyes seemed to look into his soul. Thanks again for dinner tonight. You're welcome. It was wonderful. I think I found my new favorite place to eat. I have to agree. We might have to do business dinners more often. Lance paused as he met her eyes. This was so out of character for him, but he had to push it out before he lost his nerve. Or a date? Her smile was enough to wipe away his worry. I'd love that. You have my number. Now, I'd better get out of here before it gets much later. I need to catch the subway. Well, why don't I give you a ride? My car is just outside in the parking garage. He pulled his keys out of his pocket. She bit her lip. Are you sure? I don't want to make you go out of your way. You already had to come all the way here for dinner. Yes, I'm sure. Unless you really want to ride the subway in this weather, I'm pretty sure it's going to start snowing any minute. Not really. A ride would be great. She picked up her bag and checked her pockets for her keys and phone. Okay, I think that's all. Lance followed Deborah out of her office and down to the street. Flurries had begun, so Lance walked quickly toward the parking garage with Deborah hurrying to keep up. He unlocked and started his Mercedes before they reached it. Nice. I bet you love having that feature. Deborah opened her door and climbed in. Lance climbed in his side and fastened his seatbelt. It's perfect for nights like these. Okay, where are we headed? Deborah gave him the address and he entered it into his GPS. So, how far out of the way am I having you go? Where's home? It's not too far from where I'd need to head out. I live in Staten Island. Lance turned left toward the Upper East Side. Have you lived here long? No, I've only been here for about a month. I love it. The view of the city is killer. Deborah rubbed her hands together as she watched out the window. Lance turned the heat up in the car and blasted the defrost. That's great. I've thought about finding a place around there, but then I get another idea for a clothing line and the idea slips my mind again. Staten Island is nice. My brother had a place out there for a while, but then found a place in Connecticut that was cheaper to raise his family. Is his son the one who has the hockey game? Lance stopped at a stoplight and looked over at her. The street lights cast a soft glow around her, and it amazed him again just how beautiful she was. Deborah smiled. Yes, I'm just hoping I can make it over there with this storm rolling in. I might have to catch the next game. With the rate this winter is going, we could have another foot by tomorrow. Lance checked the GPS and continued down the road. Traffic was slow, even for a Friday night, and it felt like they were crawling. Not that he minded. He was enjoying the time alone with Deborah. It's very possible, although I'm pretty sure this is supposed to clear up. Deborah pulled her phone out and frowned before typing something back. Everything okay? He asked. Deborah shoved her phone back into her bag. Yes, it's fine. We just had a model cancel on us for Monday. I'll have to find someone to replace her, but I'm still not thrilled. It's the third time she's done this. I've had that happen a few times before, and it's aggravating. It was the worst when they canceled for the fashion shows because many of the outfits were sized for specific models and he'd have to scramble to find someone to work. It really is. Oh, hey, there's my apartment. Just pull up front. Deborah rearranged her bags and pulled her hood up on her coat. Lance squeezed his car into a spot near the front door. Thanks again for dinner. I know it was short notice, but I wanted to see you again and go over those mock ups. Deborah set her hand on his, and even through her glove, it sent a thrill through him. Thank you. I needed to get out, and I had a wonderful time. And I appreciate the ride home. Of course. And Hey, if you need a ride to the hockey game, I could take you. It would be good to get out of the house, and I miss the sport. Lance wanted to shake himself for asking her out so quickly, but it had just come out. Her hand was still on his, and it was doing crazy things to his mind. I might take you up on that. I usually take a train out and then have my brother pick me up, but it would be nice to have company. She opened the car door. I'll need to leave here around 4 o'clock to get there on time. Lance ran through everything that needed to be done the next day, which was pretty much nothing, and nodded. That should be fine. I'll be right here tomorrow at 4. Perfect. See you then. Deborah climbed out and walked quickly to the door of her building before disappearing inside. Lance couldn't help grinning as he pulled back out into traffic. This weekend was shaping up to be much better than he had expected. Chapter 5. Deborah checked herself in the mirror one more time and tried to squash the butterflies that raced around in her stomach. She thought of changing into something nicer, but a hockey game was one of the last places she wanted to wear a dress. She tugged at the jersey t shirt she wore and decided it would be fine. Aiden was used to seeing her dress like this for his games, and she figured if Lance didn't like it, things probably wouldn't work out anyway. The doorbell buzzed as she applied a little more lipstick, and it made her jump. She hurried over to the monitor and pushed the button. Hey, Lance, come on up. I'll be just a sec. By the time Lance knocked on her door, Deborah had found her coat, gloves, and scarf. She traded out the scarves a few more times before deciding on a navy blue one. Her breath caught when she opened the door and saw Lance standing there with his hands in his pockets. He had traded his suit for a t shirt, sports jacket, and jeans. He hadn't shaved, and the effect made her heart race. Hey, sorry, I lost track of time. Deborah turned to find her keys and tried to breathe normally. Wow, that is quite the view. Lance stared out the windows in the living room. Deborah opened the door wider so he could come in. That's the reason I chose this exact apartment. It took a while to save up, but it's totally worth it. Lance walked over to the windows. I have to agree, this is breathtaking. The snow adds a quiet beauty to the city, doesn't it? It really does. Unfortunately, it's not going to do much for our trip today, is it? Deborah stepped away from the window. It was already cutting it close to game time, and they needed to get out of there. It's not too bad out there, although I might not be able to say the same thing for the roads outside of the city. Lance followed Deborah out of the apartment, then waited for her to lock it. Deborah pushed the button to the elevator. Aaron said the roads aren't too bad in Stamford. I guess we'll see. By the time they arrived at the arena in Stamford, Deborah had finally been able to calm her nerves. Lance was as down to earth as she'd hoped, and his sense of humor had her laughing until her sides hurt. As they walked into the arena, Deborah's nerves returned. She hadn't brought a date to a game before, and she knew her brother wouldn't let her live it down. He was younger than her and had tried to set her up several times over the years. She hoped he'd see what a great guy Lance was. Aaron sat with his family a few rows up, and he waved when he caught sight of Deborah. His eyes flicked between Lance and Deborah, but his grin never wavered. He stuck his hand out to shake Lance's as soon as they sat down. Hey, I'm Aaron. You are? This is Lance, and this is Hannah and Michael. Aiden is out on the ice somewhere. He's number 7. Oh, there he is. Deborah pointed him out. It's nice to meet you. Are you a hockey fan? Aaron asked. I played when I was younger, when I could sneak away from my mom, Lance laughed. The game started soon after, and Deborah was torn between the excitement out on the ice and the man sitting next to her. Every time he cheered, he'd brush past her and send another thrill through her. The roars from the crowd, the chill in the air from the ice, and the smells from the concession stand slowly soaked in, allowing Deborah's mind to relax and enjoy the game. They were just 3 adults watching a hockey game. She could handle this. She'd only met him a few days before, and even though he made her heart race, she wanted things to go slow. Aiden skated straight for the goal and just missed the net, knocking everything else out of her mind. Aiden's team was good, but they had to fight to keep up with the competition. The final score was 3-2, and Aiden's team had barely scraped past to get the win. After the game ended, Deborah climbed down the bleachers with Lance, Aaron, and the kids and waited for Aiden to come off the ice. Hey, great game, buddy. Deborah hugged Aiden tightly. Did you see that goal? That's my first one ever. Aiden pulled off his helmet and sat to take off his skates. I did, and you almost had another one. Deborah held up a hand so Aiden could give her a high five. He stopped and stared up at Lance. Who is he? Hey, bud, I'm Lance. Lance shoved his hands in his pockets, looking nervous. Deborah grabbed Lance by the arm. He's my friend. He brought me to the game. Aiden's eyes widened. You mean like a date? Awesome. Come on, Aiden. You need to get changed so we can get over to Grandma's. Aaron pulled Aiden away and winked at Deborah. See you two over there. Deborah turned to find Lance staring down at her with a smile on his face. What? Nothing. It was just fun being here to see you with your brother. He grabbed Deborah's coat and held it up so she could slip her arms into it. So where is this party? My mom's house. It's about 20 minutes from here. I hope you don't mind going. We can just make an appearance and then head home if you want to. Deborah pulled her gloves on and wrapped the scarf around her neck. Lance shrugged. I got a lot of work done today, so I'm good for the evening. Just point me in the right direction. The sun had come out when Deborah and Lance walked outside. Small flurries still floated down here and there, but Deborah was thankful to see the sun. It had been weeks since the clouds had cleared up. Deborah directed Lance to the house she'd grown up in. It was large for the area, and a forest that she'd played in countless times surrounded the yard. Homesickness pulled at her as she climbed out of the car and headed for the front door. A large wreath hung on the door, decorated in large hearts. Music sounded through the windows, and Deborah could see balloons and cake in the dining room. Deborah raised her hand to knock just as her mom answered the door. Deborah, I'm so glad you were able to make it. After the blizzard kept you in for the holidays, I was worried you wouldn't come. Deborah's mom wrapped her in a hug. I wouldn't miss Dad's birthday for anything. You know that. Deborah kissed her mom and turned to Lance. Mom, this is Lance. He owns Walker Apparel. Her mom's jaw dropped as she glanced between them. Welcome. Come on in and get comfortable. If I'd known Deborah was bringing company, I would have bought more party hats. Deborah closed her eyes in embarrassment. Trust her mom to pull out hats when guests were around. Lance laughed. I'll be fine without one. Nonsense. You can have mine. Now come in before you freeze to death. She opened the door wider and closed it as soon as they were inside. Your dad is in the study, pretending like he doesn't know what's going on out here. Deborah gestured for Lance to follow her and walked back to the study. The paneling had been painted white since the last time she'd been home, but otherwise it was the same as when she'd lived here. The large oak desk sat in the center of the room, and her dad sat in his wheelchair working. Hey, Dad. Her dad looked up from his computer and grinned. It's my girl. I'm so glad to see you. Deborah leaned down and kissed his cheek. Happy birthday, Dad. She introduced Lance and waited for them to shake hands while she clasped her hands behind her back, nervous. It had been years since she brought a guy home, and the guy had left only a few weeks later. It's nice to meet you, Lance. Where's your brother, Deborah? He pulled away from the desk and around to the doorway. He's coming. Deborah noticed the troubled look on Lance's face as he watched her dad leave the room, and held back to make sure her dad was far enough away before saying anything. He's fine. He's just been sick, and this is the easiest way to get around. Lance smiled. I'm sorry, it just threw me. Is he going to be able to walk again? Maybe, but believe me, that chair doesn't stop him from doing things anyway. If there wasn't snow on the ground, he'd probably be outside pushing his lawnmower. Deborah went to the kitchen to find her mom. It was another few minutes before Aaron came inside the house, along with the kids. His wife, Sophia, came in last. She was due to have another baby any day and only left the house on occasion. Deborah's mom grabbed the party hats and insisted on having everyone put one on. She grabbed plates and forks, and Deborah took the cake out to the living room where everyone sat. After a loud rendition of Happy Birthday, the cake was cut and served. They played a few games of charades before Deborah stood. I hate to leave, but we need to get back to the city. Her dad groaned. But you just got here. She leaned down and kissed his cheek. I know. I'm sorry. I'll be back as soon as I can, I promise. Erin and her mom also took turns hugging both Deborah and Lance before they were finally able to escape the house. The roads were slushy as they drove back toward the city, making Lance drive slower than he had on the way into Connecticut. Your family is amazing, Lance said, his voice breaking the silence that had fallen over them. Thanks. I love them. Deborah could feel the pull of her home as they drove, but she pushed it away. She would be back, and she enjoyed her apartment too much to let it go. Lance reached over and laced his fingers through Deborah's. Thank you for letting me take you to the game today. She squeezed his hand. I'm the one who should be thanking you. It was a good day. It really was. He pulled into a parking spot next to her apartment. Want me to walk you up to your apartment? Deborah leaned over and kissed him lightly on the cheek before she realized what she was doing. He always left her so frazzled. I'd say yes, but it's late, and you need to get home before the roads ice up. Lance rubbed her hand with his thumb. I'll just wait until you're inside then. Thank you. Text me when you get home so I know you got there safely, okay? She hurried over to her apartment and waved before walking inside. The giddiness from the evening had her practically dancing up to her apartment. It was past midnight when Deborah unlocked her door and dropped her purse inside. She got ready for bed and climbed in with her laptop to do some work while she waited for Lance to text. The phone rang loudly through Deborah's apartment, making her jerk awake. She set her laptop on the desk so she could plug it in. She glanced at the clock to see that she'd been asleep for a few hours. She smiled when she saw Lance's number on her phone. Hey, I didn't think it would take you that long to get home. Hello? An unfamiliar voice responded. Deborah's heart thumped at her chest. Who is this? Hi, this is Sean Miller. There's been an accident, and we don't know much about the man. His phone was next to his hand, so I called the last number he dialed. Can I ask who this is? Time slowed to a stop as Deborah tried to register what he'd just said. She pulled the phone away from her ear to make sure that it really was Lance's number. Hello? The voice said again. I'm sorry. Hi. This is Debra Thomas. What do you mean by accident? He was just fine a few hours ago. Deborah's hand shook as she rubbed her forehead. He'd just left here, and they'd had a wonderful time together. We just drove by the car. It was on the side of the road. I don't know if he fell asleep or if he'd been He wasn't drinking, she snapped, then took a deep breath. Sorry, I'm sorry. He wasn't drinking, but we'd been out all day. Listen, where is he? Where are you? We're at the Staten Island University Hospital. Can I get a name for him, please? Deborah scrambled out of bed and shoved her feet into her boots. That's Lance Walker from Walker Apparel. I'll be there in 45 minutes. She grabbed her purse and keys and slammed her door shut behind her as she ran for the elevator. Listen, look for a Nikki or Ella in his phone. They're his assistants and we'll need to know ASAP. Thank you. I'll see you when you get here. She hung up the phone as the elevator doors shut. The call would have been dropped anyway, and she had his number so she could call back when she got into the cab. It was just a matter of finding one at this hour. Generally, if she waved the ad agency's name under their noses, she could get them to pick her up quickly. She put in a call to the nearest service, and they had a car there within minutes. She'd have to thank David once this was all over. As soon as the cab pulled up to the curb, Deborah yanked the door open and climbed in, then gave the address to the driver. Take the fastest way, please. This is an emergency. She wanted to pull her hair out as he turned into traffic and moved slowly toward the bridge to get them off the island. This was one time she wished she had a car. She felt so out of control letting someone else take her, and she just wanted to get there. Guilt, anxiety, and fear ran through her as they weaved their way along. She should have never made him take her to the hockey game and party. She should have just gone alone. Not that she wanted to, because it had been one of the best days she'd had in a long time. As soon as the cab pulled up to the hospital, Deborah handed over a wad of cash to the driver and jumped out. She'd made sure to leave a tip for driving so far and so quickly, and she could hear the shouted, "Thank you," as she entered the front doors. Now that she was there, Deborah had no idea where to go. She strode over to the information desk. "Hi, I'm looking for Lance Walker. I was told he was in an accident and I need to find the man who called me. Sean something." The nurse frowned at her and typed a few things into the computer. "Are you related to him?" "No, but I was told he was here and I need to see him." Deborah drummed her fingers on the counter. "I'm sorry, but unless you're family, you can't go back there. He's a high profile patient, and we don't want press getting wind that he's here." With a sigh, Deborah turned away. She probably shouldn't have told Sean who Lance actually was. She pulled out her phone and called Lance's number. "Hello?" the now familiar voice asked. "Hi, it's Deborah. I'm at the hospital, but they won't tell me where you or Lance are." Deborah turned her back so she wouldn't glare at the nurse. She was just doing her job. "I'll be right out." Deborah pushed the lock button on her phone and shoved it into her purse. The minute it took for Sean to get out there felt like an eternity. A tall man with curly brown hair walked through the door and glanced around before spotting Deborah. He walked over and held out his hand. "You're Deborah?" "Yes, that's me. How is he?" She gestured toward the door he'd just come through, and he started walking back toward it. Sean ran his fingers through his hair. "They don't know, and since I'm not family either, they won't tell me anything. I've just been keeping the police and doctor company until you could get here. I called his assistants, like you told me to. Nikki is out of town and catching the first flight back. Ella will be by in the morning. Something about a niece staying with her?" "Thank you." Deborah stopped when they got to the OR waiting room. She hated this room. She'd spent too many times in the waiting room in Connecticut when her dad was so sick, and she didn't want to be back. A doctor came forward. "You must be Deborah. I'm Dr. Peterson. We've been waiting for you so we could get more information. We're trying to find his relatives, a parent, a sibling, anyone?" "From what I understand, his parents are off in Europe somewhere, and his sisters are in other countries as well." Deborah folded her arms, suddenly chilled by the reality that was setting in. Lance had literally no one to be with him right now. No one but her, and she knew next to nothing about him. Dr. Peterson nodded and made a few notes. "You two are dating?" "Yes, well, kind of. I mean, we've just." "Yes. Is he okay?" Deborah wanted to shake him just to get the answers out of him. "His legs and right hand were crushed in the accident. He'll be fine, but it will take some time and a lot of therapy. He's still in surgery, and he may need one or two more to help his hand, but we're confident that he will be fine." Right hand. His writing hand, his designing hand. Deborah closed her eyes, trying to keep herself calm. "Thank you. How much longer do you think he'll be in surgery?" "It could be another few hours. We can find you a blanket and pillow if you'd like them. Unless you need to get back?" The doctor's kind eyes stared down into hers. "I'll stay here. A pillow and blanket would be great." Not that she would be sleeping. It was all just going through the motions. Dr. Peterson nodded. "Very well. I'll be back out as soon as we know anything else. Please, get some rest." As soon as he left, Sean turned toward Deborah. "Are you okay? I'd love to stay and help, but my wife needs me to get home as soon as I can." "Go. I'll be fine," Deborah smiled, but she knew it wouldn't look sincere. Sean handed her a phone. "Here's his phone. There wasn't much else left in the car, but hopefully this will help you contact his family." Deborah wrapped her arms around him. "Thank you for your help. If you hadn't stopped—" "You're welcome. I just did what any decent person would have done." He hugged Deborah back and pulled away. "Are you okay? Do you need anything?" Deborah shook her head. "No, I'll be fine." He smiled and left the room, leaving Deborah alone. It wasn't until then that the police officer walked over and put his hand on her arm. "Excuse me, miss, but we need to get some questions answered." He guided Deborah over to a chair and asked the questions on his form. Deborah answered the best she could, but there were too many empty spots. She should have known more about him. "Sorry, we literally just started dating, and even now, I wouldn't exactly call it that." The officer put his hand on her shoulder. "We'll get the rest. Don't worry about it. We just appreciate that you came by." We'll keep in touch. Activity happened around Deborah, but she could only sit and stare at the faded rug in the center of the room. She jumped when a nurse brought her the pillow and blanket, and she whispered a thanks before curling up in a ball on a small couch in the waiting room. She had to stay tough. It wasn't her place to mourn someone she'd just met a few days before. But when she felt like she'd known him for years, it was like a part of her had broken into a million pieces, and she didn't know how to put them back together. Chapter 6. Lance stirred and groaned in pain. His dreams had been disjointed and fuzzy, but it didn't explain why he hurt so much now that he was awake. He went to wipe his eyes, but his hand wouldn't move. Hey, it's okay. Let me get you something to drink. Deborah's voice was quiet next to him. Lance opened his eyes to find an unfamiliar room. Monitors beeped, and a nurse stood to the side writing something into her small tablet. He looked over to see Deborah sitting next to him, holding up a mug of water. He leaned forward to get a drink, and the water soothed his parched throat. What happened? Deborah set the mug down. We don't know. From what the doctors and police can tell, he fell asleep in the car. Lance wanted to reach out and touch her face as it crumbled. Hey now, no tears, it's okay. Deborah grabbed a tissue. I'm sorry, it's been a long couple of days, and now you're the one comforting me? How bad is it? Lance looked down at the bandage on his right hand. No. He tried to move it again, but it brought sharp jolts of pain up his arm. His other hand was free, but also had a few cuts and bruises on it. He reached up and touched his face. There were a couple of bandages, but they were small. That was a small mercy. You'll survive. The doctors believe you'll make a full recovery. It just might be a while. Deborah took Lance's good hand. You broke your hand. It has a few pins in it. It felt like Lance had been punched in the gut. He needed his hand to draw, to create. The thought of having that taken away made him nauseated. And my legs? Crushed. But they were able to fix them up pretty well. You'll start therapy as soon as you feel up to it. The words came out, but Deborah's voice held no expression. Her face looked worn, but it just made her more beautiful. You've had 1,000 or so visitors. We had to take most of the flowers to your studio because the scent was getting too strong. I never knew you loved lilies so much. Lance's laugh turned into a cough. He took another drink that Deborah offered, then laid back onto his pillow. They always have been my favorite. My grandma had a whole flower bed full of them, and I'd always get in trouble for picking them. My sister let that slip at a fashion show one time, and I've never lived it down. Deborah smiled. Well, everyone remembered. Nikki wanted me to tell you that the studio is taken care of, so don't stress. And Ella took over the show. Your parents will be here as soon as they can, but with the storm, it could be a bit before they can get here. Storm? Lance glanced over to the window, but all he could see was a cloudy sky. He wanted nothing more than to walk over to it, but knew that wouldn't happen. He tried to wiggle his toes, but it only brought more agony. Blizzard, actually. New York and most of the East Coast is shut down. You picked a perfect time to end up in the hospital. I haven't been able to leave because they banned anyone from traveling, which would be why I'm in these lovely scrubs. You look beautiful. Lance coughed again and winced when it jarred his legs. He'd broken his leg once when he was playing hockey, but the pain was nowhere near this bad. A nurse scurried over and adjusted something on his IV. You just rest now. Miss Thomas, if you could wait out in the hallway, Mr. Walker needs his rest. Deborah stood, but Lance reached out to stop her. Not that he could with his hand bandaged the way it was. Please, let her stay. His mind was groggy as he fought for words. He didn't know what the nurse had put in the IV, but it was knocking him out, fast. I need her. By me. The nurse paused before nodding, and Deborah dropped back into her chair. Lance tried his best to reach so he could hold her hand, but darkness won, and he drifted off. Lance gasped in pain as he did another knee bend. Sweat poured down his back, but he refused to stop. He'd been doing physical therapy for 3 days now, and healing was going too slow for him. He wanted out of the hospital as soon as possible, and that wouldn't happen until he could prove he was okay. This was the first time he'd been in therapy that Deborah hadn't been there to cheer him on. He had promised to behave and rest while she went home to get some sleep, shower, and do some work. She was behind on a few accounts, and he'd insisted that she go and get it done. At least this way, she could bring work back and do something while he was asleep. The weather had finally calmed down, and Lance's parents were supposed to be there in the next day or two. His sisters had called at different times to check up on him, but they weren't able to leave. Maria couldn't leave this close to Fashion Week, and Leslie was stuck in Africa for another month. One more knee bend, and he rested back in his wheelchair. He smiled bitterly. Wheelchair. His companion for the next several weeks. He was supposed to be doing the fashion show in just a couple of weeks, and he'd be stuck in a wheelchair. Not that it mattered. He couldn't design at all anymore. The bandage was too thick on his right hand to even try drawing, and his left hand was just hopeless. Deborah had suggested trying, but he'd never practiced that way, and it was proving to be harder than he'd thought. But the ideas kept coming, and he needed to figure out a way to get them onto paper. Great job! Let's have you do more stretches with flexing your feet, and you'll be done for the day. The nurse smiled at him and watched as he flexed and pointed his toes 10 times with each foot. This hurt worse than the knee bend, as it stretched the healing cuts on his legs. Lance smiled and turned back toward his hospital room to get a bath. With all the bandages off his legs, it was harder to shower, but he wasn't about to sit in his own sweat. Once he was done, he wheeled back to his bed and climbed in. Dr. Peterson helped hook him back into the machine that would keep his legs moving to prevent blood clots, then stepped back. You've made amazing progress in the last few days. You should be proud. Thanks, but I won't cheer until I can get out of that chair and draw again. Lance tried to push down the bitterness, but it was a constant companion lately. It'll come. In the meantime, I have a surprise for you. Dr. Peterson turned to the door, and David Fleshman walked into the room holding a laptop. Lance grinned at his friend. David hadn't had a chance to come by yet since he was busy planning his wedding. Hey, man, it's good to see you. And you brought your work with you, I see. Dr. Peterson waved and left the room, closing the door behind him. David pulled a chair up next to Lance and set the laptop on Lance's lap. Actually, I brought your work with me. Deborah told me you were having a hard time not being able to draw, so I figured I'd help out. Lance stared at him for a moment. I have a laptop. Not like this one. Just check it out. David stood to help him, but Lance stopped him. I can do some things on my own. He opened the computer with his good hand and turned it on. When it powered up, he glanced over at David. Okay, so now what? David pushed a few keys and opened a program in the lower left-hand corner. It opened up and asked for a voice activation to train it. Welcome to your new drawing program. Lance had heard of these programs but had never seen them. He pushed down the emotion as he looked over at David. How'd you get a hold of this? I may have promised exclusive advertising once it was ready to be marketed. And you might have to be part of the commercial, but we'll get to that later. Now, you need to train your program to understand your commands. It responds to both your voice and your eye movement. It's going to take a bit of learning for both you and the computer, but time is something you have a lot of right now. Thanks for the reminder. Lance smiled to take the edge off his remark and clicked on the microphone. After a few tries, the cursor finally went to the center of the screen like he wanted. With a few commands, he was able to draw a basic stick figure. Now this is award-winning work right here. David laughed. It's better than mine. I couldn't even get it to look like a person. Anyway, I really hope this works for you. I know your mind can't stop creating. Lance continued working on a dress that had been on his mind, then pulled himself away. Thank you. Really, this is huge for me. I've been going crazy just sitting here for the last few days. You're welcome. I thought you might like it. David glanced around the room and leaned forward. So, Deborah, huh? Lance laughed at the mischievous grin on David's face. We've gone out a few times. She's a pretty amazing woman. She is. There's a reason I've had her as one of my top employees for several years now. And I have to say, I'm thrilled you two finally got a clue and started dating. David rubbed his hands together and leaned back in his chair. Lance raised his eyebrow. You do realize we just met, right? Aaron's always been on the account, not Deborah. I didn't realize that until just after Christmas. I may or may not have put Erin up to getting you two together at the party. She does a better job than I thought. Things clicked into place with the party that night. Erin had searched all over for Deborah since the moment Lance had joined her group. Of course. Do you play matchmaker for every single person in your life? Nope, just my good friends. David grinned and turned the subject to the newest fashions in the industry, and Lance was relieved with the change. By the time David had to leave, they'd gone over the next 3 months of advertising for Walker Apparel. Lance waved as David left and turned back to his computer, eager to learn more about the program on it. He frowned when he saw that the battery had nearly died while they talked. He leaned forward to get the power cord and looked around for a place to plug it in. The nearest one was behind his bed, so he set down the laptop and attempted to stand. Standing wasn't too bad, but when he tried to take a step, it was like a knife ran down his legs. He stumbled to the ground, knocking over a tray on the way down. His bad hand hit the ground, sending a blinding pain through his body that filled him with nausea. He grimaced as he reached to plug in the cord, then curled up into a ball until the agony subsided. The door opened and several pairs of shoes ran into the room. Lance? Deborah called out and came around the side of the bed. She dropped down next to him and helped him sit up. Her gentle touch soothed his nerves, but he couldn't speak through the pain. What happened? He shook his head and allowed the doctors to lift him back into his bed. The muscles in his legs screamed as they helped him stretch out. Some of the stitches had popped, so the nurses cleaned those up, while another nurse checked his vitals and added more painkillers to his IV. Deborah stood silently to the side, holding his good hand. Her other hand covered her chest as she watched everyone work. This was not how he wanted her to see him. Once he was bandaged up and they were satisfied that the danger had passed, most of the nurses left the room. The medicine had started kicking in, making him groggy. He didn't want to sleep yet, not when he had things he needed to work on. His main nurse, Vicky, glared down at him. What was so important that you had to do it yourself? Lance grunted as he shifted positions. I needed to plug in my computer and didn't want to bother you guys with it. Well, you did, and you pushed back your release time another day or two. This is why we have a call button. Please, use it next time. Vicky set the remote next to him. Now I'm leaving your room, but only because Deborah is here. When she leaves, we're sending someone else in to babysit you. I don't. Lance took a deep breath. Losing his temper wouldn't help anyone, and he really needed to get out of there. Fine. I guess I earned that. Thank you for helping me. Vicky nodded at Lance and then Deborah before leaving the room. There was silence for a moment before Deborah let go of Lance's hand and helped him plug the cord into the laptop. She sat it on the table and grabbed a chair to sit next to the bed. So, was it worth it? She asked quietly. No, but I really wanted to use my computer. He laughed at the lame answer. Why aren't you at work? Deborah reached out and combed Lance's hair away from his eyes. Her touch sent a thrill through him. David, Aaron, and Carissa kicked me out of the office, with orders not to come back until you're released. Technically, I could fire Aaron and Carissa, but I can't really argue with David. They really ganged up on you there. Lance closed his eyes, trying to force away the drowsiness. He wanted to talk to Deborah while she was there. David came by. Oh, really? I knew he'd been planning to, but I thought he had meetings all day. Lance nodded toward the laptop. He brought me that. It's to help me draw while I can't use my hand. Deborah's eyebrows raised. That's great. How does it work? Lance gestured for her to hand it to him, then opened it so he could show her. It's voice and motion controlled. Deborah leaned closer, and Lance caught the scent of her lavender soap. That's amazing. How did he find something like this? He said he had to bribe the company, Lance chuckled. I'm just glad I can get these designs out of my head. They haven't left me alone even when I'm drugged. Although, maybe those aren't the best ones to use. Deborah laughed. Maybe not, although they could make quite a splash on the runway. I can just see it now. Actually, I can. Lance pulled the computer back toward him and tried to make the program see what he was seeing, but his mind was moving too fast to concentrate. Ugh, never mind. Maybe I should sleep instead. Deborah stood and hesitated before kissing Lance on his forehead. Her lips were soft and made him want to feel them on his, but sleep was beginning to overpower him. I'll go get something to eat. You rest, and then we can go over the designs. I'm not the best at drawing, but I can get the basics down, for now. She squeezed his hand and left before he could respond. Lance lay back against his pillow and allowed the sleep to swallow him up. Visions of the clothing line teased the back of his mind, and he promised himself he would draw it out as soon as he woke up. Lance stretched and closed the laptop. He had managed to get a few of the ideas done before he needed a break. It took a lot more work than just sketching them with his hands, and the frustration was almost overwhelming. A few of the designs had to be redone a few times because they didn't turn out like he'd wanted. He stared at the window that Deborah had opened for him. The snow had partially melted, but the clouds still hung overhead. Should we take a walk? Deborah asked. She'd been watching him design and giving suggestions here and there. Lance looked down at his legs. I can't, remember? She sighed. You know what I mean. You've gone between your bed and the therapy room, and that's it. Let's see the rest of the hospital. Then you can see more of the outside world than that window has to offer. Am I that boring? He sighed and twisted so he could get his legs off the bed. He waited for Deborah to pull his chair over, and then she took his arm to help him sit. She put down the footrests so he could use them, then pushed him toward the door. Ready to run away? She asked. Yes, please. Where should we go? Oh, wait, can you grab me a blanket? Lance hated being so helpless, but the fall had made him realize he'd better behave. The doctor had shooed him out for a solid 10 minutes as he taped the areas where the stitches had popped. He also threatened to keep Lance for another week if he didn't listen. Deborah grabbed the blanket from his bed and laid it over his legs, making sure that it wouldn't tangle in the wheels. Her auburn hair fell over her shoulder as she bent over, and Lance reached up to move it out of her face. Thanks. Now we don't have to have everyone staring at my bandages. Lance's face burned. He hadn't meant to admit how embarrassed he was, but Deborah seemed to frazzle him. They won't even pay attention. Now let's go get a milkshake in the cafeteria. Then we can tour the rest of the hospital. A milkshake sounds fantastic, as long as they have chocolate. I've been dying for some ice cream for days. Lance smiled at a couple as they went past. Deborah stopped and pushed the button on the elevator. You're in luck because this is the best ice cream in New York. I'm sure it is. Lance played with the loose end of the bandage on his hand. Have you heard from Nikki or Ella lately? No, and I'm surprised you haven't. They promised to keep you updated on everything. Deborah's tone of voice matched the frustration Lance felt. He should be out there doing the shows and everything, but instead he was stuck here. I need to get to the show this weekend, even if you have to break me out. If you keep behaving, maybe we can do that. Deborah pushed him out of the elevator and past the gift shop, then down the hallway to the cafeteria. Windows lined the room, and Lance was happy to see more than just the square he'd stared at for so long. Deborah ordered their shakes and paid for them, despite arguments from Lance. You paid for dinner, it's my turn. Besides, it's just a shake. I'll let you pay for dinner next time. She wheeled him over to a table and then went back to get their order. Okay, be ready to have your mind blown. Lance raised an eyebrow, but didn't say anything. He tried some of the shake and was surprised by the richness of the chocolate. Okay, you've made a believer out of me. See, they're the best. She stared out the window as she enjoyed her shake, giving Lance the opportunity to take in her beauty. The burgundy top she wore brought out her hazel eyes. She glanced over and smiled. What? Nothing. Just enjoying the view. He reached over and took her hand in his. You don't have to stay here with me, but I have to say, I've enjoyed your company. I don't have to be here, but I've enjoyed it too. Now finish your shake. I want to keep walking. She threw her straw wrapper at Lance and laughed when it hit him on the nose. Oh man, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hit you. I mean, I did, but not there. Lance let go of her hand and grabbed the wrapper to throw back at her. It landed in her hair, which made her laugh even harder. Hey, I have a handicap. You have to be nice to me. Not a handicap, just an inconvenience. Not the same. Her eyes danced as Lance pulled the wrapper out of her hair. That's a good word for it. Lance dropped the wrapper on the table and stared at the bandage on his bad hand. I just worry that it will never be the same. Deborah studied him for a moment before standing and grabbing their cups. No feeling sorry for yourself. It's time to move on. Lance watched as she dropped the cups into the garbage and came back. He needed to pull himself out of this bad mood. It wasn't fair to her, and it wasn't helping him. So, where are we going now? Back to your room. We need to get your coat. Deborah pushed him down the hall and back to the elevator. When they got to his room, they found that it was occupied by two people. They turned and smiled when Lance entered. His parents had come earlier than he'd expected. Oh, Lance, you look terrible. His mom rushed to him and crushed him into a hug, jostling his legs and hand. He cringed, but didn't complain, even if she did insult him. He was just happy to have his parents back. Dear, you can't tell him that. His dad bent down and hugged him tightly. And this time, Lance couldn't help groaning a little as his hand was smashed into the wheelchair. Oh, I'm sorry, son. I'm so glad to see you two. When did you get in? Lance was conscious of Deborah sneaking closer toward the door, and he reached out to take her hand with his good one. We came straight here. His mom paused as she watched them. Who is this? Lance looked up at Deborah. Mom, Dad, this is Deborah. She's been with me through this whole mess. Oh, it's so nice to meet you. Are you a nurse here? His mom smiled, told Lance she wasn't quite sure she was okay with him dating his nurse. Deborah laughed and shook her head. No, I work for the ad agency who does advertising for Lance's company. And there it was, his mom's dazzling smile. She approved of Deborah because her job obviously meant money. His dad held out his hand. It's a pleasure to meet you, and you're going out of your way to help your client. The shock was evident on Deborah's face. I came because I was called when the accident happened. We're dating, Dad. We'd finished a date when I was on my way home. Deborah gathered up her coat and purse, her face red. She smiled nervously at his parents before turning to Lance. You're in good hands, so I better get going. I'll be back tomorrow if you need me. Lance reached and squeezed her hand, sad to see her go. Thank you. I'll call in the morning. She waved and left the room, leaving it just a little darker without her smile. Lance stared at the door until his mom made a noise. She's beautiful, his mom said, shifting uncomfortably. We didn't chase her off, did we? A little. I think that's part of meeting the parents, though. I felt the same way on Saturday when I met hers. Lance wheeled himself over to his bed and climbed in. His mom helped cover him with blankets and got a drink for him. I wish we could have been here sooner. It's okay, Mom. I can take care of myself. Besides, you two deserve a chance to see the world. Where were you anyway? Lance leaned back onto his pillow. Now that he was in bed, he realized how tired he was. England, with a small trip to Ireland and Scotland. I wanted to see as many castles as possible. His mom's eyes lit up. You should have seen them. You just walk around the corner and they're right there. That's great. I'll have to try to go next time I'm in Europe. He closed his eyes. Did you get to see Maria? We went over to visit for Christmas. She has a new boyfriend. They seem pretty serious, but you know how long that lasts, his mom laughed. Lance smiled. Yes, he did. She'd been through several in the time she'd been in France. But then, she'd talk nonstop about this guy when he talked to her on the phone. Maybe this time would be different. Hey, I hate to kick you out right after you got here, but I really need to sleep. The keys to the house should be over there with my clothes. There's food in the fridge for you. Oh, right. We're sorry. We should have asked how you were feeling. His mom kissed him on the forehead. We'll come by later. His dad pulled the keys out of Lance's coat pocket. It's good to see you, son. I just wish it had been under better circumstances. I'm glad you guys got back safely. I'll see you later. Lance waved as they left and lay back against his pillow. Now that he was alone, he could allow the disappointment that Deborah had left to wash over him. He'd had a great time with her, and then his parents had shown up. It's not that he wasn't happy they were back. He'd just enjoyed getting past his injuries and spending time with her. He just hoped she'd come back to visit soon. Chapter 7. Deborah stared up at the ceiling as she lay in bed. She needed to get up and head into work, but for now she wanted to enjoy her warm bed. After counting all of the tiles for the 10th time, she finally rolled out of bed and climbed into the shower. The hot water felt good on her tense muscles. When she climbed out, she picked out a maroon blouse and black pencil skirt to wear to the office. She twisted her hair up into a bun and slipped on some mid-calf boots. After grabbing some breakfast, she made her way down to the street and onto the subway. Something she'd done every day for years now. Something to keep her mind off what she was missing in Staten Island. As hard as Aaron and David had fought to get her to take the day off, it was a bad time. There were too many accounts happening right now that she had to check up on. After work, she'd take the train out to see him, but for now, she needed to do her job. The weather was still bitterly cold, but the snow had decided to stay away, which Deborah was grateful for. More snow meant it would be harder to visit the hospital later. Thanks to a breakdown in the subway, Deborah was half an hour late by the time she got to work. She nodded to the receptionist as she passed through the office and hit the elevator button. Her phone buzzed just as the elevator door closed, so she wasn't able to answer the call. Once she was in her office, she turned on her computer and pulled up the files on the Smiths and Jewelers account, then called Mr. Smith back. Hello, this is Deborah. Sorry I missed your call. I just stepped onto the elevator. What can I do for you? Hey, we were just going over some of the ideas for the ads and found one we really loved. Aaron's phone was busy, so I tried yours. Things must be pretty crazy over there. Deborah laughed. You could say that. Okay, so which commercial did you want to go over? It's the one with the puppy. I believe it was Aaron's suggestion, but it's brilliant. I'd like to roll that ad out as soon as possible. Do you think it's possible to have it out in the next week or two? Deborah scrolled down to the ad he'd mentioned and smiled. Of course. It looks like Aaron already has some actors in mind. And Jake works for the shelter, so I'm sure he can get a hold of a puppy. Excellent. Send me over the numbers and get the studio booked. Oh, and I'm sending over our latest pieces for our newspaper and magazine ads. Wonderful, thank you. I'll get back to you with details as soon as we have them. Deborah hung up and stood to go find Aaron just as she burst through the door. Please tell me that was Mr. Smith. I've been trying to get through to him. She dropped a pile of papers on Deborah's desk. Deborah handed Aaron the notebook she had been taking notes on during the phone call. Get started on calling around. He wants to get the ad going as soon as possible. Jake still works at the shelter, right? Yes, and he has the puppy picked out already. Erin bit her lip as she studied the notes. This is great, thanks. Oh, and Nikki from Walker Apparel is online too. She's pretty frazzled. Deborah moved over to the phone. Thanks, let me know what you find out. Erin nodded and left the office. Deborah sat and took a deep breath before pushing the button to talk to Nikki. Hello, this is Deborah. Is this Nikki? Deborah minimized the Smithson account and pulled up the window with Lance's company. Oh, there you are. Listen, do you have the copies you made the other day? Lance was supposed to get back with what he wanted to make, but we can't find them anywhere. We need to have them ready by the end of the week, and we're hitting panic mode. Deborah turned and opened the filing cabinet. Yes, I have them here. I'll get them scanned and sent over right now. Is there anything else? Yes, we have to get the ads out tomorrow for the show. Are they ready? Those should be in Lance's email. I sent them over last night. Do you have access to his files? There was a pause and some clicking on the other end of the line. No, he has a lock on it, and his computer isn't in the office. Okay, give me your email address and I'll send you a copy. And don't worry, I made sure everything was on schedule to be released tomorrow. It will also be on the news on every local channel for the early morning news and the evening news. Then I have 2 agents running your social media campaigns. Wow, you're good. Thank you so much. Things have been so chaotic since Lance had his accident. Nikki's voice broke. Deborah grabbed the files and sorted out the pictures Lance had made notes on. I'm here to help. I'll get these sent over. Let me know if there's anything else you need. Thank you. Nikki hung up and Deborah moved over to the scanner. As soon as they were scanned, Deborah sent them to Nikki, wishing there was more she could do. She put the files back in the cabinet and moved to the next campaign. It was after 3 before Erin brought Deborah a sandwich. Deborah pulled off her reading glasses and leaned back in her chair, grateful for a break. I don't suppose you got yourself some lunch. Erin set down the food and sat down in the chair across from Deborah's. So why are you really here? I told you I had everything covered. There were things I needed to do, and Lance's parents are in town, so I figured he wouldn't need me. Deborah knew it sounded lame. It's not like his parents had treated her badly, she just didn't want to overstep her bounds. Erin narrowed her eyes. Do you like him? Yes, a lot. But I still have work that needs to get done. Deborah held up the file that had been sitting next to her elbow. Uh-huh. And those things are jobs you can't do while you're there with him? Erin took the folder from Deborah. This commercial was shot earlier this morning. It's not something I couldn't have taken care of. Yes, well, then there were the files Nikki needed for Walker Apparel. If I'd been gone, they'd still be running around in a panic. Besides, we just met, and while I like him, I can't just leave work whenever I want. Deborah opened the container that held her sandwich. Oh, man, thanks. This is exactly what I needed. Chicken Club is good for the soul. Now, tell me what else needs to be done, and then I'm going to push you out the door. The fashion show is in just a couple of days, and I'm guessing Lance is probably stressing out right now. He needs you to be there for him. Deborah took a bite as she thought about what else had to get done that day. She'd finished most of it. If you could work on the jewelry commercial and make sure Nate is getting his done, I think we'll be set for the night. Oh, and call Nikki to make sure she got the ads. Erin wrote down the instructions. Most of this has already been done. Nate told me he sent you the files and sent them on to the client. He also asked if Jake needed a roommate, so that was awkward. Deborah laughed. Poor guy. You know he's desperate if he's asking that. I guess my old place was rented out already. Well, it is New York. Thing is, Jake could probably use one for a bit. His acting is taking off, but it'd help out while we're preparing for the wedding. She stood. Good luck. Tell Lance hi and that we have everything under control. Thank you. Deborah finished her sandwich and sent out a couple of emails she had left before switching off her computer. Just as she was pulling on her coat, her cell phone rang. It was Lance. Her heart raced a little as she answered. The last time she'd received a call from this phone, it had been bad news. Hello? Hey, are you busy? Lance's voice was quiet. Deborah slipped her purse over her shoulder. I was just about to leave to come and visit. Is everything okay? I want to get out of here, and I need you to help me. You have your license, right? His voice went even quieter. Yes, but I don't. You don't need a car. I just bought one, and I need you to bring it to me. Deborah stared at her phone for a second. He bought a car? Are you okay? Lance chuckled. Yes, I promise. They just told me they want to keep me for a few more days, and I can't take it. I'd have my parents do it, but they agree with the doctor. They think I work too hard, and this is a good break. So the dealership is just going to let me walk in and pick up a car? She couldn't believe she was even playing with the idea. Lance had to be on too many painkillers to think they could pull this off. Yes, I took care of it over the phone. I've used them several times before, and they'd heard about my accident on the news, so they were more than happy to help me out. I told them you'd be coming in. Think you can handle driving a Porsche out to get me? Deborah's mouth went dry. The last car she'd owned was a beat up Honda that she sold when she moved to the city. I guess so. Give me the address and I'll be there as soon as I can. And if I get arrested, you're bailing me out. Fair enough. Now, I need to go. I just heard the doctor outside my room. He gave her the address and hung up. Deborah stood there for a few minutes before she could force herself to move. She'd never so much as cheated on a school assignment. And now she was about to break a guy she'd just met a couple of weeks before out of the hospital. She hurried out of her office before she could change her mind. Oh, hey, Deborah, David called from behind her. She turned to see him walking quickly toward her. Hey, how are you doing? I'm good. Here, Lance asked me to give you this. He handed her a roll of $100 bills. It's just in case they give you any trouble. Oh, and here's the paperwork for the hospital discharge. Just leave it on his bed. Deborah took the papers and the roll of cash and looked up at him. You knew about this? Are you kidding? I'm the one who gave him the idea. Now hurry. The dealership should close in the next hour or so. David grinned and turned to walk away. Remind me not to let the two of you around each other anymore, she said. David laughed. That's probably a good idea. See you tomorrow. If I'm not in jail, she muttered, and hurried toward the elevator before anyone could make this worse than it already was. Deborah took a taxi to the address Lance had given her and climbed out. The driver smirked as he looked back at her. Thinking big, eh? He took the cash from her. Time to live a little, she smiled and climbed out. The door shut on his laughter. She took a deep breath and opened the door to the dealership. It was time to get this over with. It was time to turn on her business side. The new car smell welcomed her as she went inside. One of the salesmen perked up when he saw Deborah, and he walked quickly over to her. Hello, how can we help you today? I'm here to pick up a car for Lance Walker. He said you'd be expecting me. Deborah's heart beat wildly as he studied her. He turned and walked back to the computer he'd been working at. Please give me your name. It's Debra Thomas. She pulled out her ID and handed it to him. And you're his wife? Why do you have different last names? He narrowed his eyes. Wife? Seriously? Lance would hear about this. Yes, I go by my maiden name for professional reasons. We're married. I see. Congratulations. I had no idea that he's finally tied the knot. We've worked with him for years. Deborah smiled to force down her irritation and leaned forward. We're trying to keep it quiet. The announcement will come later, so I'd appreciate it if you keep it between us. Of course. He smiled and typed a few more things into the computer. Everything seems to be in order. I'll have to have you sign a couple of papers, and then I'll get you the keys. Wonderful. Deborah held in the sigh of relief. She wasn't in the clear yet and had to keep up appearances. Everything was fine. This wasn't normal for her to be in a place like this, where Lamborghinis, Porsches, and Bentleys sat on display, cars that she only ever dreamed of driving. The man came out of the office a few minutes later. Okay, let's have you come in here so we can have you sign the paperwork. Your car is being detailed right now. Wonderful. She followed him into a small office and signed in the areas he told her to. Most of it had been filled out, and Lance's name was filled out electronically, so she only had a couple of places to sign. The fact that her name was now associated with the paperwork of a Porsche left her breathless. And what was she thinking driving the thing all the way to Staten Island? All right, let's go get your new car, Mrs. Walker. He let Deborah out of the office and smiled as she was handed the keys. Enjoy. And tell your husband to be a little more careful this time. Deborah laughed with him. I'll do that. Thank you. A sleek black Porsche sat parked outside of the dealership, and several employees stood smiling as Deborah unlocked the door and climbed in. She put the key in the ignition and started the car, praying that she'd remember how to drive after all this time. The first few feet were a little jumpy as she got used to the sensitivity of the brakes and gas, and then she pulled out and onto the road. She could do this. A computer sat on the dash, so she typed in the address of the hospital and settled into driving. Traffic was heavy in parts due to the evening commute, but for the most part, it was a smooth drive. She realized too late that the route would take her through a tunnel, but she didn't have much of a choice. There were too many cars around for her to get out of the lane. She paid the toll and continued on. As she went into the tunnel, she couldn't help but hold her breath. She went on the subway all the time, but this just seemed different as she drove through. As soon as she was out of the tunnel, she dialed Lance's number. He answered after a few rings. Lance Walker, how may I help you? His voice sent a thrill through Deborah. Hey, I just came out of the tunnel. I should be half an hour or less, unless I get lost. Were you able to pick up the order? Deborah stayed silent for a moment. What? The order. Were you able to get it with no problem? There was interference in the speaker and muffled voices. It clicked that Lance was trying to cover up what this was actually about. She waited for him to get back on the phone before she answered back. Yes, I got the order. When should I drop it off? As soon as possible. It's 1 second. There was more muffled talking before Lance ordered whoever it was out of the room. Sorry, my parents were trying to take my phone. I had to tell them it was for the fashion show, and it would completely flop if this call didn't happen. By the time you get here, I'll have my parents convinced that I'm exhausted and need my sleep. I hope. Thanks again. Glad I could help. I'll be there as soon as possible. Deborah ended the call just as she heard the door open in the background. No wonder he wanted out of there. Somehow that seemed to be the hardest part of the plan. It took a couple of tries to get the car parked straight, but Deborah finally turned the car off and pulled the keys out of the ignition. She checked her reflection in the mirror, adding just a touch of lipstick. Deborah smiled at the nurses she passed as she walked into the hospital. She'd been there often enough that most of those on duty knew her, and now she was going to try to get past all of them with the guy who couldn't even walk. Lance's parents came around the corner and Deborah quickly backed up behind a column. She didn't want to give them any hint that she'd been around. As they walked past, discussing how they'd changed the house so he could get around easier, Deborah sighed. From what Lance had told her, the house had looked pretty much the same his entire life. They were willing to go out of their way to help him out, and here she was helping him escape. She could walk away right now, take the car to his house and go back home. Or she could get him out and back to work where he could help Nikki with the problems there. No, maybe his parents were right. He should have a break. But it was his choice. He was a grown man. He was acting like a child by hiding, but he was still in charge of his own life. Deborah pushed off the wall and walked into his room. She quickly turned away as he pulled on his shirt over his head. He had obviously worked out by the tone of his chest and arms, but she hadn't expected to see it when she walked in. A knock probably would have been a good idea. Oh, hey, you're here. Lance's voice was happier than she'd heard it in a while. She peeked to make sure the shirt was on before turning back toward him. Hey, I saw your parents. They were talking about fixing the house up for when you get there. He smirked. They say that now, but I'm pretty sure I heard them making plans to visit my sister in Africa. Maybe they'll go after they're done with the changes. Deborah helped put his socks and shoes on. She lowered her voice. Do you think this is a good idea? Lance tipped Deborah's chin up so their eyes met. I need to get out of here. There's absolutely nothing they can do for me here that I can't do at home. I haven't had an IV for 2 days, and I've been cutting down the painkillers to where I'm down to just the bare minimum. Please. The flecks of green in Lance's eyes mesmerized Deborah as she stared into them. She finally nodded. Okay, but we need to hurry. I assume they'll be in to do therapy or something soon. Already took care of that. I had my mom and dad help so I'd make sure everyone was satisfied. Now, do you have the papers from David? Oh, yes, they're right here. She pulled them out of her purse and smoothed them out. You really think this will help? Lance shook his head. I have no idea, but I'm not about to wait around to find out. Oh, and the cash? I figure I better pay them for the wheelchair since we'll be taking off with it. I thought that was for the car. She pulled the roll of cash out and handed it to him. It was. He tossed it on the bed next to the papers. But since you had no problems, I figure we might as well use it. I'll pay David back as soon as I get back to my computer. Deborah moved closer so he could wrap his arm around her to climb into the wheelchair. And we're just going to walk out of here? Yep. Remember, you were going to take me on a walk the other day. We're just doing it now instead. Oh, and you'll need to carry my laptop bag over your shoulder. Having me take it would look a little suspicious. He pulled on his coat, and Deborah helped him zip it up. How close did you park? Just around the corner. I figured we wouldn't want to have everyone watching. Deborah put his bag over her shoulder and pushed his wheelchair toward the door. Lance looked back at her. Thank you. I owe you for this. Hey, anything for my husband? She emphasized the last word, making Lance chuckle. Sorry about that, but it was the only way they would have let you out of the dealership with it. He nodded at his doctor as they pushed past. Thankfully, Dr. Peterson only nodded back before continuing his discussion with the nurse. They continued out the door to the back of the hospital, where most of the patients went for their time outside. No one was out because of the weather, so they had to move quickly before questions were asked. Deborah glanced around and ducked around the corner toward the car. She unlocked the door and started it using the remote, then opened the trunk. Wow, I didn't know it had all those features. Lance waited for her to open the door and moved himself from the chair to his seat in the Porsche. Deborah quickly folded the chair up and shoved it in the trunk before going to the driver's side. Her heart beat rapidly as she backed out of the parking spot. Lance took her hand, sending tingles up her arm. Hey, it's okay. Relax. He squeezed her fingers. That's easy for you to say. You didn't just kidnap a patient from the hospital. In her rearview mirror, she could see a few nurses rush out the doors and look around. Dr. Peterson followed closely after and ran his hand through his hair. Looks like we didn't quite make a clean getaway. Lance laughed. They're not coming after us. We'll be just fine. Besides, I overpaid the bill by quite a bit, so they can't complain too much. Deborah glanced over at him. How do you know how much the bill was? I pulled up my chart while the nurse was getting my medicine for me. They really need to make their passwords harder to figure out. He leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. So you're a hacker on top of a fashion designer. Good to know. Deborah glanced into her mirror to make sure no one was coming. Where are we going anyway? Lance shrugged. You can take me to my office if you'd like. I just don't want to go home. I'm thinking that's not the best place to go. Do you know where David lives? Maybe you could go there. Deborah pulled onto the freeway and headed for Manhattan. He moved to a small town outside of the city. I could call him. Lance pulled out his phone. Deborah tapped her fingers on the steering wheel. No, that would be bad now that I think about it. He still has the paparazzi after him, and that's the last thing you need right now. Good point. Lance stared out the window. You okay? Deborah checked the mirror again, then glanced over at him. You look a little pale. He nodded. I'm just tired. That took more effort than I thought it would. Deborah sighed and tapped in an address. She knew the way, but it helped to have the computer remind her of all the turns. It was a few minutes later that Lance's breathing became deeper as he fell asleep. Hey, Lance, wake up. Deborah shook his shoulder. We're here. Lance jerked awake and glanced around. Where are we? My apartment. You'll stay here until we can get you back home. She helped him out of the car and into his chair. Nikki's grabbing some stuff for you and she'll be by later. She's pretty ecstatic that you're back. Lance rubbed his eyes. Man, I must have been out. How'd you get all of that planned? Well, it was hard to do over your snoring, but thankfully Nikki could still hear me. Deborah pushed the button on the elevator and waited for it. This was the first time she'd used the parking spot and hoped the manager wouldn't get suspicious. When the doors opened to her floor, she pulled her keys out of her purse. Lucky for you, I just had the guest room decorated, so no sofa for you. She pushed him into the room, although I admit it's a little more feminine than you're probably used to. The lilac bedspread and curtains had been picked out specifically for her mom's taste. Her dad always joked about how much her mom loved purple. I can change them out if you'd like. No, this is perfect. I was getting bored with the white walls at the hospital. Purple is a good change. He waited for Deborah to help him up onto the bed. We might have to do something about the height of the bed, though. Not that I mind your arms around me, but I need to be able to get in and out easier. Deborah bit her lip. My own bed isn't much better. I guess we could do the sofa bed if you really need it. I'll make this work. Sorry, I shouldn't complain. You really helped me out today. He smiled and pulled out his laptop. I'm glad I could help. Now I need to get some sleep. Oh, hey, Nikki called while I was at work. She was frantic because she didn't have the designs. I sent her copies of the ones we talked about. Lance sighed. This is part of why I needed to get out. Nikki and Ella do a fabulous job with the adjustments and running shows, but the management part isn't something they're used to. Well, you two can talk about it when she gets here. Oh, I think that might be her. Deborah went to buzz Nikki up and put the teapot on the stove. She wanted some hot chocolate before bed. When the knock came at the door, Deborah let Nikki in. Hey, thank you again for bringing him those things. I'm glad I could help. Nikki followed Deborah into the spare room and set the supplies in a chair. Lance had fallen asleep, so she put her fingers to her lips and walked out of the room with Deborah right behind. You're so sweet for offering your room to him. It's so close to work and the studio. Not that it will do much good. I don't see him getting far with a wheelchair. Deborah glanced back at the guest room. We'll make it work for him. Thanks again. Nikki smiled. That's what I do. Give me a call if he drives you crazy. Deborah waved and closed the door behind Nikki. She made her mug of hot chocolate and climbed into her bed. The day had taken quite a different turn than what she'd been expecting, and she was exhausted. She just hoped she'd made the right decision. Chapter 8. Lance stared up at the lilac curtains. He needed to get up and move, but his legs and hand were screaming at him. He'd weaned himself off the meds like he told Deborah, but after all the times he'd gotten in and out of bed the day before, he was hurting. He had to make sure the show was ready to go, and he really needed to get out of the apartment and over to the theater. It just wasn't going to happen. He had a hard enough time making it when he was physically fit. But how would he make sure everything was perfect when he couldn't even get out of his wheelchair? There was a tap at the door before Deborah peeked her head in. Hey, I have some breakfast for you. Do you want some ibuprofen with it? He nodded. That would be great. She walked in and helped him sit up. Her hair was still damp and smelled of strawberries. He breathed in deeply, allowing himself to relax. I'll be right back with your tray. Lance watched her go, amazed that she was there and willing to help him. He opened his laptop and pulled up his email. Most of them were from Nikki, but there were also a few about orders that he needed to answer. He hadn't had a chance to ask Nikki about the orders for the award ceremonies, so he couldn't answer those yet. Here you go. Deborah entered with a tray carrying orange juice, toast, and scrambled eggs. I hope you like eggs. These look fantastic. He set the computer down and took a bite. Much better than anything I've had before. Deborah blushed and waved away the compliment. I think you're just used to hospital food. Maybe, but they're still good. Is there anything else you need? Lance hesitated. No, I'm fine, thank you. I'll just be answering emails and phone calls all day. You can head to work if you need to leave. She shook her head. David told me if I leave you, I'm fired. Sounds like him. He took a bite of toast and wiped off the crumbs. Actually, can you help me into the living room? I don't want to get food on your sheets, and I need to get up and move. Of course. Deborah took the tray and left the room. Lance sat up, wincing when he put too much weight on his hand. He probably should have had the bandage changed before he left the day before, but he just wanted to leave. He twisted so his legs hung over the side of the bed and scooted forward until his feet touched the floor. He just stood to do it himself when Deborah came into the room. Oh, no, you don't. She quickly put her arm around his waist and helped him into his chair. Remember what happened last time? Yes, but that was several days ago. I'm a lot stronger now. But he wasn't, and it was frustrating him. He still felt incredibly weak. Deborah pushed him into the bathroom. Do your business, and I'll help you into the living room when you're done. Thanks. Lance washed himself and slowly unwrapped the bandage on his hand. If Deborah didn't have anything to replace them, he'd have to send Nikki for more. The last of the gauze stuck to the wounds on his fingers, and he gasped in pain as he pulled it free. The hand was still a mess, but it was good he'd unwrapped it. The incisions needed air, and he wanted to try to get some strength back into it. He pushed his chair close to the sink and shaved, then studied his face in the mirror. The scratches were nearly healed, but the bruising around his eye looked worse. It was yellow and purple. Hopefully, it would be gone by the fashion show, or he really would stay backstage. He pushed himself away from the mirror and out into his room to get changed into clean clothes. It was hard to put everything on, but he wasn't about to have Deborah help. It was a little easier to maneuver without the bandage on his hand, but it made his hand hurt to try to use it. By the time he had his pants on, he was ready to scream. He forced himself to put the shirt on so he could go out into the living room. He grabbed his laptop and set it on his lap before leaving the bedroom. Deborah looked up from her work with a smile, but dropped her pen when she caught sight of him. What's wrong? Your face is white. Lance shook his head, not wanting to admit how much pain he was in. He scooted close to the table where his breakfast sat and took a bite of toast. The throbbing in his hand was bad enough that he couldn't swallow the bite because of the nausea that kept washing over him. Hey. Deborah put her hand on his face and turned him to face her. I want to help, but I can't if you keep hiding what's wrong. You're in obvious pain. Please, tell me what I can do. Lance clenched his good hand into a fist to fight past the worst of the throbbing. She was right, even if his pride didn't want to admit it. I shouldn't have taken the bandage off my hand before I changed clothes. Deborah took his hand in hers and lightly touched where the incisions were. These are inflamed. Did they look this bad before? He nodded. They're supposedly healing, and according to Dr. Peterson, it'll only get worse before it gets better. Deborah stood and left the room. When she came back, she had a first aid kit. I haven't gone through this, so hopefully we have what we need. Lance tried another bite of food and a drink of orange juice while Deborah went through the kit. He needed food in his stomach if he was going to take the ibuprofen. She finally held up a roll of gauze in triumph. Dad told me I should always carry this, and I hoped I had some. I'll have to thank him for the kit when I see him next. She carefully wrapped his hand, wincing whenever he jerked in pain. Sorry, I'm out of practice, but this should help. You're a lot more careful with it than the nurses were, Lance smiled at her. Thank you. Where did you learn to wrap so well? Deborah put the kit back together. My parents wanted to make sure we were prepared for everything. Well, for my sake, I'm glad you are. The pain was still there, but manageable. He finished his breakfast and set up his laptop. It felt better working at the table instead of in bed like he'd been doing. He was able to concentrate better, even though the emails took 3 times as long to type with his hand wrapped up. Deborah sat down next to him and slid the laptop over to sit in front of her. What do you want to say? I can do it. You have your own emails to worry about. He reached out to take the laptop back, but Deborah glared at him. Look, I know you think you can do it yourself, but I can do it faster. My emails are caught up thanks to Aaron, so let me help you. Otherwise, there's no point in me staying home. The stubborn flash in her eyes only made her beautiful. It was part of what Lance found so fascinating. He sighed. Fine. I need to tell them that the magenta tulle is not what we ordered for this line, and that it has to be the light coral I'd asked for. Deborah's fingers flew across the keyboard before turning it toward him. How's this? Lance skimmed the email. Perfect. Go ahead and send it. Then I need another email to Ella to tell her that she needs to check the storage room for any coral dresses she can find. I have a feeling we'll need more than what the company plans to send us. It's the last I'll be using them if they're going to mess up the orders like they did. Deborah went into another email and typed out the message, changing parts where Lance pointed them out. Once they were through his emails, she turned the screen back toward him. There. Now you can go back to your designing, and I need to go make a few phone calls. Lance reached out and caressed her cheek. Thank you for everything. She leaned into his hand. That's why I'm here. Oh, hey, can you grab my phone off the bed? I forgot it. Of course. She walked into the guest room and brought it back out. Here you go. He took the phone and smiled as she left the room with her own phone. He checked the message, and his stomach dropped when he heard the 3 messages from his parents and the one from the hospital threatening legal action. Not that they had a chance in court. He'd paid his bill, and he had every right to leave. He deleted the message and sent a text to his parents to tell them he was fine and would be home later. He called Nikki to make sure everything was okay and to thank her for bringing him the razor and extra clothes. She gushed about how wonderful Deborah was. Lance smiled into the phone and waited for her to finish before changing the subject back to the award ceremony gowns. They were nearly done, which meant he could pass the word along. Once that was done, Lance pulled up the files he'd been working on. The dresses were nearly done, so he tweaked a few and added more color to them. Once those were ready, he started on the men's line. The sports coats were cut longer than he normally liked, but he liked how they complemented the gowns they'd go with. Wow, those are amazing. Deborah leaned forward to set a mug of hot chocolate next to the laptop, and her arm brushed his. Lance took her hand and kissed it. This was something I came up with in the hospital, but I was too drugged to make them work. I'm hoping they'll be ready for the show in France. Deborah set her other hand on his shoulder. They'll stand out, that's for sure. I love that cut. I haven't seen it for a while. It's been out for years, but I figured it's a great time to bring it back. Lance stretched to ease the muscles in his back. Deborah moved away, and Lance felt the loss of her so close. The hospital called me to see if I knew where you'd gone. They called me too. I guess I should probably call them back. Tomorrow, if ever. Lance grinned. Okay, so now that's done. I better go do some therapy. I have a few weights and stuff you can use. They're in the study, where I tend to avoid them. Thanks. Lance wheeled himself toward the study, wincing at the pressure on his hand. Maybe he needed to go back on some of the painkillers. Most of what Deborah had, he wouldn't be able to use. There was no way he'd try to use the weights. He started the leg raises and flexed his feet. The pain was worse than it had been for a few days, and he growled in frustration. He had no choice but to call the hospital to get some meds called in, or he wouldn't be able to function. Maybe his doctor would do it, though. Deborah stood in the doorway when Lance turned to leave the room. Things are that bad, huh? Bad enough I have to call my doctor, and I really don't want to do that. Lance stretched his legs out in front of him. I just hope to have some miraculous recovery where I'd be walking by the show. I'm not sure I'll be okay by Christmas at this rate. Deborah knelt down in front of his chair and took his hands in hers, holding the bad hand delicately. You were just in a major accident. It's only been a week and a half. Give yourself some time and it will happen. If you push yourself, it will only make things worse. He smiled. I'm not used to taking things slowly. She studied his face for a moment. It's time to go for a ride, I think, after you call your doctor. Where are we going? Out. I figured we could go on a walk and get you out of the apartment. The weather is supposed to be pretty mild today. Lance followed her. Fair enough, but could we please run by my office? I just want to check on a few things. Your doctor would fire me as your caregiver, but I think it would help your assistants if you can go in. But we'll only be there for a few minutes. I don't want to wear you out. Deborah picked up his phone. What's your doctor's name? Dr. Carter. I can dial it myself, you know. Lance gathered up his laptop and the files he'd been looking at and organized them the best he could. She smiled and put the phone up to her ear. I know, but I can do it easier. Lance sighed. At least let me talk to him. Hello? I need to talk to Dr. Carter's nurse, please. Thank you. Deborah handed Lance the phone. When the nurse came on, Lance explained the situation to her. After listening to the lecture about how he should still be in the hospital, she promised to pass on the message and get right back to him. Lance hung up and set the phone next to his laptop before going to his room to change. Except that the only other clothes he had were dirty from the day before. He really needed to go home and get his things, just not yet. He brushed his teeth and combed his hair the best he could before going out to find Deborah. She had changed into a pair of dress pants and a blouse that accented her curves perfectly. Her hair was down, his favorite style on her. Ready? She pulled on her coat. As ready as I can be right now. We might need to run by a store to get me something nicer to wear. My employees might have a heart attack seeing me in sweats and a t-shirt. He pulled his coat on and zipped it up. Dr. Carter called as they left the apartment, and after yet another lecture, he agreed to call in a prescription. Lance thanked him and hung up just as the elevator door closed. A cool wind blew through the city, but the sun was out, melting the snow on the sidewalks. Deborah flagged down a taxi and helped Lance into the taxi while the driver put the chair into the trunk. Lance scooted over the best he could so Deborah could get in. He wanted to take her hand, but she was on the wrong side, so he put his arm around her, pulling her close. He gave the driver the address to the pharmacy near his office and sat back to relax. This day was already looking better. Lance waited while Deborah and the driver got his chair folded out, then climbed out of the taxi. His legs protested when he put weight on them, but he felt a little stronger than he had a few days before. If only he could get the pain under control. He thanked and paid the driver, then they headed into the pharmacy. Once they had Lance's prescription, Deborah pushed Lance toward his office. He couldn't help the nerves that ran through him. This was the first time back, and he knew the bruising would shock his employees. But he also knew there were things that needed to be checked on. The elevator ride seemed to take forever to finally get to his floor. They went into the main office and were met with shrieks of delight as Nikki and Ella surrounded them. They gave him a hug and stepped back. Welcome back! Nikki beamed and gestured toward the model she'd been working with. This is the last of the order for the wedding. What do you think? Lance rolled himself forward so he could get a closer look. The seams were exact, and the material was just perfect. Where are the others? On the rack. Nikki nodded toward the dressing room where a rack of gowns hung. The ones on the end are for the award ceremony. We'll work on those as soon as this is done. Perfect. You've done a great job. Have you started on the new line yet? I need to get those ads going. It felt good to be back doing what he loved to do. Even dealing with the pain was worth it, which reminded him that he hadn't taken his pills yet. Maybe distraction was the only thing he'd needed. Yes, those are in the box by your office. They're after the ceremony dresses. I can help you go through them if you'd like. Lance shook his head. No, keep going with what you're doing. Call a few more people in for the evening as well. We need to get these done as soon as possible. I want to use them for the runway. Deborah can help with this. Deborah pursed her lips but didn't say anything. She walked over to the box and pulled it open, gasping. She pulled out the first gown and held it up. I'd seen these in drawings, but they look fantastic in person. I have to admit, that looks much better than I'd envisioned. Let's hang them on this rack as we pull them out. He moved closer to Deborah. I'm sorry, I should have asked instead of assuming you'd help. She smiled and pulled out the next dress. This is your turf, it's okay. I'm just used to being the one telling people what to do. Lance frowned. I'm not sure about that one. Let's set it on the other side of the rack until I figure out what's wrong with it. I don't see anything wrong. It's beautiful. The black satin dress was one he had struggled with in the design phase. Deborah held it away from her, studying it. With the right jewelry, it'll be perfect. You're probably right. Let's set it over there and go through the rest, then I'll come back to it. She set it on the rack and picked out another dress. With each new dress, Lance would sort them between being perfect and needing a little work. He was thrilled with how they'd turned out, and even those he'd said weren't ready were still close. They just needed a few subtle changes. But that first one he'd put aside continued to nag at him. Maybe Deborah was right, and it just needed some jewelry to go with it. These are going to knock Anthony's socks off. Nikki stood next to him, studying the gowns on the rack. Where'd you come up with the ideas? Lance shrugged. They just hit me the night of the New Year's party, and I worked on them the whole next day. Nikki nodded and glanced over at Deborah. The New Year's party, huh? Yes. Okay, so are you done with the others? I'd like to see these on the mannequins, so we can figure out what needs to be fixed. Lance tried to ignore the fact that his face was burning after Nikki's assumption. It had nothing to do with Deborah. It was the whole excitement of the night, right? Nikki smirked and went to find Ella. The mannequins were organized in front of Lance, and his employees went to work. Lance shifted in his chair and winced in pain. If he could just get up and walk around, he was sure he'd feel better. Deborah left his side and came back a couple of minutes later with a large glass of water and a pill. Here, I think you forgot something. He smiled up at her. Thank you. She put her hand on his shoulder. Of course. I'm going to go grab a bag of chips or something from the vending machine. Those pills can be a killer on the stomach. Lance put the pill in his mouth and drank a few large gulps of water. Hopefully, this wouldn't make him as drowsy as whatever it was they gave him in the hospital. By that time, the dresses were up on the mannequins. He went from one dress to the next, suggesting the changes. Only one needed a few major alterations with the sleeves and the cut of the skirt. When he came to the black satin gown, he stared at it. Where's the costume jewelry? I want to try a couple of things with it. He waited for Ella to pull it out and drape a large diamond necklace around the mannequin's neck. That's good. Okay, we'll hold off on altering this one. Let's fix the rest and get a photographer in here first thing tomorrow. Deborah came into the room with a sandwich and some chips. Wow, you're already done? Yes, thankfully these were fairly painless to fix. Lance took the sandwich she handed him and put it on his lap. I thought you were just going to the vending machine. She shrugged. Nothing looked filling enough to help your stomach, and I saw the deli as we walked toward your building. I hope you like chicken. These are my favorite, thank you. He fumbled with the paper around the sandwich until Deborah took it from him. She unwrapped it and handed it back. This bandage is pain, thank you. No problem. She walked along the dresses, studying each one. It shouldn't have bothered Lance, but he couldn't help feeling self-conscious about it. I think we're going to need to rearrange a few of the ads I had set up for these. When do you expect the men's suits and outerwear? Nikki turned toward Deborah. They should be here tomorrow. We had to use a different company to make them because of time constraints. Deborah nodded. I understand that. It's got to be crazy right now. Do you think I could bring one of my photographers tomorrow? That way we can get the ads rearranged and sent out tomorrow night. Lance let go of the breath he was holding. She liked them. Of course. I'm thinking the delivery will be around noon. If you think you need more time, I can call and see if they're ready sooner. We've picked up orders in the past when we're on a deadline. That should be fine. I'll have Aaron and Carissa come too. It'll go faster that way. She turned and smiled at him. These are beautiful. Thank you. A wave of dizziness suddenly hit Lance. Oh boy, I need to lay down. Debra was instantly at his side. We pushed you too hard. Let's get back home. I'm not sure I can make it there, and I don't want you to have to carry me. There's a couch in my office. Just help me in there, please. Lance's head was spinning. Debra pushed him into the office and helped him move from the chair to the couch. She took one of the decorative pillows and set it gently under his head. There was rustling before a warm blanket was laid over the top of him. She kissed him on the cheek. Do you want me to stay? Lance hesitated before nodding. As much as he wanted to say he was fine without her, he knew that wasn't true. Please, I just need to sleep for a bit, and then I'll be ready to go. Of course. She brushed his hair out of his eyes and kissed his cheek once more before walking away. As Lance drifted into darkness, the feel of her lips brought a smile and a small thrill of excitement in his stomach. Chapter 9. Deborah sat on a small armchair in the showroom, working on a new layout for the ads. She didn't want to take any pictures until they had everything set out, but she was still able to rearrange by comparing the dresses to the drawings. It was something she probably could have done in the morning, but it kept her busy while she waited for Lance to wake up. He'd been pale when she helped him lay down, and she hoped it was just the medicine affecting him. She wouldn't forgive herself if she'd helped him escape when he really should have stayed in the hospital. The models and Lance's assistants had cleaned up and left an hour before, leaving the studio empty except for the two of them. She was tempted to turn on some music so it didn't seem so quiet, but she couldn't risk waking him up. She stood to stretch and wandered through the showroom. Boxes and crates filled shelves, each labeled with buttons, snaps, zippers, and other accessories. An old-fashioned sewing machine sat on a pedestal in the corner. Deborah recognized it as the machine that was part of the company's logo. Dresses, shorts, shirts, and other items hung on racks, labeled with the season and theme. Everything in the room was organized perfectly, and the thick white carpet had no stains. How he managed to do that in the winter was beyond her. Aaron, Nate, and Carissa constantly teased her about her neat and tidy office, and it made her feel a little better knowing she wasn't the only one who liked things in their place. A thump, followed by a groan, came from the office. Deborah's heart pounded as she ran into the office to find Lance on the ground. He pushed up on his elbows and looked around. I forgot I wasn't in my bed. Deborah crouched to help him sit on the couch and then into his chair. Are you okay? Lance struggled with pulling up his pant leg, so she helped him push it up higher. A small part of the incision bled a little, but otherwise it looked fine. I'll be okay, but I need something looser to wear. Deborah checked her phone. It's pretty late. I'm not sure we'll find any place open right now. We can run you home just to grab a few things. He shook his head. No, not yet. I'm not ready to face my parents and their lectures. Deborah glanced out at the showroom. Could you sew something? I saw bolts of fabric out there. His face brightened. No, not with my legs how they are, but I have a better idea. Can you help me down to the basement? You have a basement? Deborah's eyebrows raised. Several of the buildings in this area do. We use it for storage. Deborah pushed Lance toward the elevator. I wondered where all your older clothes went. What I saw in here only goes back a year or so. He nodded. We keep things out so people have an idea of what we've done in the past, but we can't keep too much out. The rest goes downstairs until it's back in style again. Then we do alterations. A group just had their dresses made out of refurbished dresses, and from the email I received this morning, they're absolutely in love with them. Perfect all the way around. She pushed the button to the basement and watched the numbers go down. We're not going to freeze down here, are we? No, we keep it airtight. and make sure the temperatures stay just right to preserve the materials. He typed a code into the keypad next to the door, and Debra pushed him through. Whoa. There were boxes upon boxes full of clothes in the room, all labeled by season, year, and article of clothing. It was a shopper's dream come true down here. So, what are we looking for? Winter clothes. Let's go back a couple of years when sweats were big. As much as I detest them, I need a pair or two until these incisions heal. Lance directed Debra toward the middle of the room where they stopped. While Lance went through a few boxes, Debra wandered over to the women's section. She pulled out a sun hat and pair of sunglasses with large lenses. She paired them with a scarf from the winter section and a maxi skirt with leopard print. Now that is style. Lance's voice behind her made her spin around. He laughed, clapping his good hand on his knee. Oh man, that look on your face was classic. She cleared her throat and pulled off the hat. Sorry, I was just having fun while I waited. No, I loved it, really. Although I think you should try this hat instead. It complements the print of your skirt. He held up a black hat with roses, daisies, and a large blue bow. Wow, that is loud. Did you design that? She set her sun hat back on the box where she'd gotten it and tried on the hat Lance was holding. Come to think of it, I've never seen this in my life. I think we have gremlins infiltrating the storage area. He rolled his chair backward and turned to go down another aisle. Yes, I think so. Otherwise, this would never have shown up. He came back, wearing a scarf from the hippie era, along with a shirt that clashed spectacularly with it. Okay, I thought the hat was bad. What else do you have in this place? She put the hat where he'd gotten it from and pulled off the maxi skirt. I don't even know. Some of this came from my dad's best friend. I bought his company a few years ago, and his taste is a little more eccentric than mine. We pull some of this out when we're working on Halloween or other themed lines. My employees rate it for their costume parties, which I don't mind as long as they put it back. Debra laughed and turned to another box. They could wear something new every week and never repeat. Pretty much. Okay, time to be serious. I need some dress clothes. He pulled out a plaid button-up shirt and a pair of striped pants. I'm going to try these on. No peeking. He went back the way he'd come, and Debra shook her head and went the other way. Several of the boxes were sealed, while others were in plastic wardrobe bags hanging on racks. Every now and then she'd catch a draft from the temperature control, and it brought a slight musty smell that she hadn't noticed before. She moved along to a section from the 50s and found a poodle skirt and shirt to go with it. The Oxford shoes were a size too big, but she'd make them work. She ducked into an old dressing tent nearby and changed into the outfit. The blouse was a bit tight, but the skirt was perfect. She slipped on the shoes and went to find a ribbon for her hair. Once she was done, she went back toward the entrance. Lance? Her voice echoed off the walls. One sec, he called back. Don't come this way yet. Debra closed a few boxes that were left open from other workers and waited for him to come around the corner. Okay, I'm ready. He came around the corner and looked quite spectacular in his outfit. I'm thinking this will be my new fashion show getup. What do you think? I think it's perfect, especially with the evening gowns you're presenting. She put her hands on her hips. What about this? Good for my next meeting? I'm thinking my employees will really take me seriously. Only if you're advertising for leather jackets or jukeboxes. He tapped his chin. I'm thinking something more along the lines of this. He opened a box and pulled out a red dress that looked like it belonged in a Bridesmaids Dresses Gone Wrong show. Yes, this'll do. I see how you are. Well, if that's how you feel, I just have to say that I'm not quite as fond of yours as I thought. I think you need to try something else. She went through a few more boxes and came up with a kilt. She raised an eyebrow. Why do you have this? Showing off my Scottish roots, I guess. Don't knock it. I can make it look good. He held his hand out and she dropped it on his lap. Okay, if you insist. She walked back to the dressing tent she'd used before and changed. She carefully folded the skirt and blouse back up so she could put them back, and then tried on the dress. Yes, this definitely belonged to an old bridesmaid once upon a time. Although, she turned and inspected herself in the old mirror at the end of the aisle. It was still ugly, but it accented her curves pretty well. She put the poodle skirt, blouse, and Oxfords back before going in search of some heels. Among the boxes where Lance had found the dress, she found a pair of 2-inch spiked heels and tried them on. Perfect fit. Lance came around the corner and whistled. Wow, that is one ugly dress, but you made it work beautifully. Thanks. And wow, that kilt is awesome. But I suggest you hold off wearing it until you're out of the wheelchair, or at least until you have the bandages off, Deborah laughed. I don't know, it's roomy, and it allows air on my legs so they can heal faster. He tried to keep a straight face, but started laughing. Okay, one more chance. I found a suit over here, and I'm pretty sure it'll fit. Deborah went to the racks of dresses near the back of the room and went through them. Most were too small for her, but she found one that was made of a maroon chiffon. She usually saw the material in lighter colors, but this was perfect. She tried it on and stared at her image in the mirror. It almost looked like it was made for her. The fabric was loose and flowed around her, like the dresses she'd worn to dance in years before. The cut was a little lower than she preferred, but it worked. She pulled her hair up into a twist and went to find some jewelry. There was a box full of it nearby the racks of gowns, and she used a necklace, earrings, and a clip for her hair. She took the other dress back to where Lance had found it, then put away the shoes. The movement of the dress made her feel like she was floating as she moved down the aisle. Okay, this is it. Are you? Lance stopped as he came around the corner. He looked sharp in his tux and shiny black shoes. His jaw dropped as he stared at Deborah. Wow. Deborah smiled and turned in a circle. You like? I found it on the racks. I hope it wasn't for something important. He leaned his elbow on his chair and scratched his chin. I'm speechless. For once, she laughed. You look fantastic. I think you found the perfect suit for the show. I was thinking of wearing this to the Grammys, actually. I was invited this year, but I probably won't go if I can't walk by then. Deborah took a step forward and held her hands out. Come here. You know I can't stand. Remember last time I tried? But he paused as he studied her. She leaned forward to grasp him by his arms, careful not to touch his hand. Together, they pushed up and helped him stand. See, I knew you could. You just needed a little motivation. He put his arms around her and winced as he moved from one foot to the other. It's a good thing the meds kicked in. Yep, I know. Will you dance with me? Just for a moment, please. Deborah's arms were sore from helping hold him up, but they turned in a circle, swaying back and forth. She looked up into his eyes and her breath caught as he leaned down to kiss her. It only lasted a few seconds before Lance pulled away and collapsed into his chair, but the touch of his lips on hers left her breathless. She helped him put his feet back onto the pedals. Sorry, I shouldn't have pushed you so hard. Lance reached out and touched her face, making her look into his eyes. No, don't be sorry. That's the best I've felt in a couple of weeks. She leaned forward and kissed him again, allowing her feelings to rush to the surface. When she pulled away, he had the same dazed expression that she knew she wore as well. I'll go change and get you back to my place. No, just leave this on. It belongs on you. He swallowed hard. Okay, but I still need to grab my clothes. I'll be right back. She went back to the tent to collect her things and covered her face in her hands. What had been fun had suddenly turned into so much more. She smoothed her hair, trying to digest what had just happened. It was just a kiss, right? Not really. That had meant more than she wanted to admit, and she hoped he was okay after the dance she had insisted on. She took a deep breath, gathered her things, and went back to find Lance holding a pile of clothes on his lap. Ready to go? Yes, I should have some bags up in the showroom for our stuff, he smiled. Deborah set her things on his lap and kissed him again before pushing the wheelchair toward the door. There was a content silence between them as they gathered their things and left the building. The temperature had dropped in the time they'd been at the office, and they had to wait a few minutes for a taxi to finally stop for them. Deborah helped Lance in, and by that time the driver had gotten the chair into the trunk. She climbed in next to Lance and gave the driver her address. She leaned her head against Lance's shoulder and enjoyed his closeness. He kissed her forehead and put his arm around her. When they got up to Deborah's apartment, Lance took his things to his room, and Deborah went to her room to change. She loved the dress and didn't want to get food on it while she made dinner. She put on a t-shirt and shorts and pulled her hair into a ponytail before going out into the kitchen. After a quick glance in her fridge, she pulled out a pan and threw in some butter. Lance came into the kitchen as she threw onions into the pan to get them sautéing. "What smells so good?" He pushed up from his chair and sat in the bar stools on the island. He had also changed into a t-shirt and shorts. "Butter so far. I figured I'd make some pasta for us. Are you hungry?" She dumped some garlic into the pan next and pulled out a pot for the noodles. "That sounds fantastic. It feels like it's been hours since the sandwich you brought me." He pulled the cutting board toward him to cut up some mushrooms that Deborah had pulled out of the fridge. Deborah took out 2 plates and cups and set them on her table. "I'm glad because I usually make way too much, so it'll be nice to have someone to share with." Lance pushed the mushrooms toward the stove. "You can share with me whenever you want. I'll take it." "Sounds good to me." Deborah dumped the mushrooms in and sautéed them, before adding flour, then heavy cream and Parmesan cheese. "But that means you might have to deal with tomatoes." "Oh, you're killing me." Lance put his hand over his heart. "Anything but those." Deborah gave him a sly grin, then turned to stir the food. "Okay, I wouldn't do that. Besides, I don't usually have many tomatoes until the summer, when I get them from my parents' garden. Nothing beats a homegrown tomato." "I agree with you there, even if I can't eat them anymore." Deborah drained the noodles and added them to the sauce to mix them up. She dished the food out on the plates and set the pan down. "Oh, I guess I should have set the table up there." "It's fine. I can come over there." Lance slid off the stool and took the couple of steps toward the table. "It's getting better all the time." "That's great." Deborah picked up her fork and watched Lance try to eat with his left hand. "Maybe I should have made something easier to eat." "No, I need to learn to eat with my left hand." He spun the fork until the noodles collected and took a bite. "See? I'll be fine." Deborah took a bite of her noodles. The flavor was just perfect. Her mom had taught her to make the Alfredo sauce when she was young, but it was hard to get it to taste just like it should. "You know, even though you don't want to go back to the hospital, I think you need to get those stitches out." Lance sighed. "I know. They're starting to itch, but I really don't want to go back." "There's always Dr. Carter. He gave you the painkillers. I'm sure he'd do it without charging you through the nose." The thought of taking him back was bittersweet. She knew that once he went back to Staten Island, he'd probably go home, and it had been nice to be around him for the last couple of days. "That's probably what I'll do, but I have those photos that need to get done in the morning, so maybe after that we can go." Lance picked at his food. Deborah thought through everything she needed to do the next day. She could get a lot of it done before noon, and then she'd need to be there to get the pictures done, but she could work there as well. "That'll work. For now, I need to get these dishes washed and get to bed." Lance pushed away from the table and took both plates over to the sink. "I can't do the washing part, but I can help you load the dishwasher." "Thank you." Deborah took the rest of the dishes to the sink and rinsed them off before handing them to Lance. Once they were done, Deborah helped Lance into the guest room and up into his bed. She leaned against the bed so she was close to his face. "Sleep well. I'll see you in the morning." He pulled her close and kissed her. Deborah couldn't think as she leaned into the kiss. He pulled on her, but she resisted. What if she were to hurt him? She broke away, trying to catch her breath. Lance reached out and caressed her cheek, sending a thrill through her. "I hate to end this, but I forgot my pills, and I shouldn't have tried walking to the table. Could you get them for me? Of course. Deborah leaned down to kiss him again, then stood. She went to the kitchen to get a cup and then grabbed his pills from the table next to the window. Lance took the pill, and Deborah helped him get a drink. Thank you. You're welcome. She kissed his forehead. Good night. She turned the light off as she left the room and went to her own. It was nearly 2 in the morning when she was finally tired enough to sleep. Thoughts of Lance and everything they'd done that day kept running through her head. She'd only known him for a couple of weeks, but it felt like she'd known him forever. And in that moment, she knew she didn't want to lose him. The alarm didn't go off the next morning, and Deborah was running late. She had to settle for toast and made a couple of extra pieces for Lance. She poked her head into his room to find him still asleep. Hey, Lance, wake up. You're supposed to be at the office. She walked closer. Lance jerked awake. What? Oh, okay. I'll be there in a bit. Do you need help? Deborah searched for the dress pants and shirt that he'd picked out the day before. I'll be fine. He pushed himself up with his good hand and rubbed his face. What time is it? After 9. Deborah grabbed the pants off the chair and tossed them on the bed. I'll get you in your chair when you're ready. By the time Lance was ready to get out of bed and into his chair, Deborah had collected her work into her laptop bag and eaten her breakfast. As she helped him out of bed, he gasped and nearly fell, but she managed to get him into the chair. What's wrong? She crouched down so she could look in his eyes. I don't know. I'm in more pain today than I've been in since the accident. It's probably good we're heading to the doctor today. So you made the appointment? Deborah pushed him into the kitchen to grab his food and then headed for the door. He shook his head. Dr. Carter will see me whenever. I'll call when I know we're done with the shoot. Let's just hurry and get that done first. Deborah bit her lip as she pushed the button to the elevator. I feel like I should just take you now. No. His response came out harsher than she'd heard him speak before. He clenched his fist. Sorry. I'm in more pain than I thought, I guess, but I just really want to make sure the shoot happens first. Okay, we'll do that. She helped him climb into his Porsche, noting his gasps of pain every time he moved his legs. The trip was silent as they drove to Walker Apparel. Deborah helped him out, hoping that Erin was on her way. She wanted this to be done as soon as possible. She didn't want to admit it, but having him snap had rattled her. They made their way up to his office, and she avoided looking at the button that would have taken them to the basement. The happiness from the night before was gone, and it bugged her that she was letting it get to her. A photographer stood in the middle of the showroom with his camera, studying the gowns in front of him. After dropping off their stuff, they watched the photographer at work. Lance pulled away from Deborah and pushed his way between the different models who wore the gowns. He had them adjust waistlines and collars to make sure they looked just right, and then moved on to the next model. Deborah sat in the armchair she'd used the day before and pulled out her laptop so she could work until they were ready for her. She wanted to show Lance what she'd come up with, but he was still talking to the models. It could wait until later, when they had the real photos to use. The delivery came right at noon, just as Lance had expected. Erin, Carissa, and their photographer showed up shortly after, and they got everything set up. Deborah waved at them and walked over. So, what do you think? She nodded toward the displays. I think I need him to design my mom's dress for the wedding. Erin studied one of the gowns. These are amazing. I've seen his work before in the ads, but this is the first time I've seen them up close. You should watch him design. It's fascinating. Deborah watched him work. He seemed at ease, which helped her relax. Maybe the pain had subsided. Erin moved in closer. So, what's up with you two? Deborah shrugged. We've done a few things together. I'm helping him out, but there's not much else to tell. Right, Erin smirked. And he just happens to be living with you? In 2 different rooms. You realize he's injured, right? He can't exactly do things on his own. I know, but I still think it's incredibly romantic. Oh, I think it's our turn. Erin waved the photographer over. Deborah pulled up the ads she designed so they'd know what poses they wanted, and the photo shoot began. She smiled over at Lance as he watched and kept working. She was determined to make this as perfect as possible for him. Chapter 10. Lance rubbed his leg, hoping to get rid of the dull ache that had plagued him all night. The shoot was finally done, and he was waiting for Deborah to wrap up with Aaron and Carissa. He tried to keep his temper in check after everything she'd done for him, but he hurt and needed to get to the doctor. When they continued to talk, he wheeled himself out into the hallway and called Dr. Carter to make the appointment. The only available time was in an hour, and it would take at least that long to get there. He thanked the receptionist and went back into the room. Hey, Deborah, I need to go. My appointment is set, and if we don't leave soon, I'll be late. Oh, sorry, I'll be right there. She continued talking and handed Erin a business card with a few more instructions before running to grab her coat. She wheeled Lance out of the showroom and toward the elevator. What time is your appointment? It's at 4 o'clock. Lance rubbed his forehead, trying to get rid of the headache that was now throbbing along with the pain in his leg. Deborah unlocked his car and opened the car door. I thought you said he'd get you in whenever. Yeah, well, that was all they had, and I really need to get in as soon as possible anyway. He tried to keep the irritation out of his voice, but noticed her frown. By that time, the pounding was bad enough that he couldn't bring himself to apologize. Deborah tried to make small talk as they drove, pointing out sights along the freeway. Lance did his best to reply, but halfway into the trip, she'd given up. Once they got onto Staten Island, Lance directed Deborah to his doctor's office. He couldn't help sighing with relief when the building came into sight. As soon as Deborah pulled the chair over to his door, he climbed out and into his chair on his own. They went into the office and checked in. The waiting room was filled with kids who were playing with the toys and moms who gossiped together. He picked the opposite end of the room and pulled out a random magazine to look through. It wasn't until they called him back that he realized it had been a fishing magazine. The nurse asked questions about his health and the care he'd been given, then handed him a robe and left the room. Deborah blushed and walked out with her, leaving Lance to change. Dr. Carter came in a few minutes later with his laptop in his arms. Hey, Lance, I hear you're having a rough time. I've been better. He scooted back on the table and adjusted the back of his robe. Let's take a look at the stitches and go from there. He inspected them and nodded. Let's get the stitches out. It looks like those are healed just fine. Great. They're driving me crazy. Lance reached down and rubbed his legs where his bones ached from the pressure Dr. Carter had put on them. Dr. Carter scratched his chin and made a note in his laptop. Sounds like something didn't heal right. I'm sending you in for an x-ray. Lance nodded. He could have argued, but this aching was new and it worried him. I guess that means I have to go to the hospital? Yes, but just go to the one near your house. No need to go to the other one. Plus, they might tie you down if you go back, Dr. Carter chuckled. Everything else looks good. Let's see what happens with the x-ray, and we'll go from there. What about my hand? Dr. Carter sighed. That's going to take a lot of therapy to get the muscles and tendons working the right way. It'll happen. I'm going to take out the stitches, but we'll need to cast it after that. A splint would allow it to get bumped, and it still needs time to heal. That was the last thing Lance wanted to hear. A cast meant he wouldn't be able to use his computer. Wonderful. I guess we should just get it over with. Taking the stitches out of his hand was painful as it pushed and pulled on the injuries, but the legs weren't too bad. The scars wouldn't be pretty, but there wasn't much he could do about it. He took the slip for the x-ray order from Dr. Carter and changed once he'd left the room. He wheeled himself out to find Deborah on the phone. As soon as she saw that he was out, she hung up and stood. Hey, how'd it go? Her beautiful hazel eyes showed concern as she hurried forward. We need to head to the hospital. If you want, I could have my parents take me. That way you can get back to work. He let her push him out to the car. Deborah didn't say anything until she started the engine. Let's see what the news is and decide from there. I don't need to get back to work tonight. We got things done at the shoot, and Erin is taking over my other accounts until I can get back. Okay, take a left up here, and the hospital isn't too far. Lance rested his head on the seat. He should have asked for some painkillers while he was there, but he could get some at the hospital. Debra nodded, but didn't say anything. This time it was Lance who tried to make small talk, and while she answered, it wasn't with her usual excitement. She pulled in next to the entrance, and two attendants came out to help Lance into his chair. Lance explained what was going on, and they helped him over to the registration desk to check in. He tried to find his insurance card in his wallet, but his bandage made it difficult to pull it out. Debra took it from him and gave it to the receptionist. Thank you. He squeezed her hand, and she smiled back at him. Debra helped Lance over to the waiting area and sat in the chair next to him. She pulled out her laptop and found the Wi-Fi. Oh, hey, Erin sent me the unedited versions of the photos. Lance leaned toward her so he could see how they looked. The lighting and angles they'd used were perfect. I'm impressed. I may have to hire your photographer for our shows. He's one of the best. That's why I stole him from another company. She chuckled and pulled up another program. Stole him, huh? That sounds like a great story. Not really. I told him what a great job he was doing and offered him more money than what he was making. He couldn't refuse. She swapped out one of the photos and rearranged the page to fit. A technician called Lance's name and came over to help him back. Lance smiled at Debra as he was wheeled away. She waved and mouthed a "good luck" just as he went around the corner. The hallway was brightly lit, and nurses smiled as he rode past them. They entered a small room with a table lying in the middle of the room. Normally we'd have you change, but unless you have a medal on, we'll just have you lie on the table. I'm good. Lance waited for them to lower the table enough for him to roll onto. He stretched out, causing the dull ache to hurt worse. He listened to the instructions, then relaxed as the technician took a couple of pictures of his legs and then one of his hand. When it was done, he was helped back into his chair. The technician flipped through the chart in front of him. It looks like your doctor doesn't want you to leave until the x-rays come back. Should be just a bit. I'd go get some food and maybe a magazine. Lance sighed. Okay. Do you think I could get something for the pain? I left my pills at my friend's house. Of course, I'll see what I can do. He smiled and pushed Lance's chair back toward Debra. Let me know if there's anything else you need. Thanks. Lance slumped down in his chair, exhausted. He just wanted a break from the pain. Debra closed her laptop. Ready to go? I have to stay until we get the results. Lance grabbed a magazine from the pile, making sure it had nothing to do with fishing, and flipped through it. Want to go to get something to eat? She offered. No, I'm not hungry. Which wasn't true. He was starving, but he was too annoyed with everything to want to do anything at that point. Debra stood and stuck her laptop in her bag. I'm going to go get something. Want me to grab you a milkshake? He shook his head and closed his eyes. No, thank you. I'll be back. Lance Walker? A voice called out. Lance jerked awake and sat up in his chair. That's me. The waiting room was nearly empty, and Debra hadn't come back from getting food. A nurse smiled at him before looking down at the paper in her hand. We're going to go get you prepped for surgery. Wait, what? Surgery? Was he still sleeping? Lance rubbed his forehead. Your x-ray showed that one of the bones in your leg moved slightly out of place, so they need to replace the pin. She handed Lance the paper. He glanced through it, reading off the results. The bones they had worked on for the surgery hadn't healed correctly, and there was a stress fracture in his left leg. He knew he shouldn't have tried dancing. How could he have been so stupid? Did you have anyone with you? We can wait if you'd like. Thoughts of the night before in the storage area ran through his mind. What had brought emotions of pleasure and enjoyment the night before brought pain, and surprisingly, anger. He couldn't bring himself to see Debra just then. No, there's no one waiting. Let's go. The girl looked at him confused. You sure? I thought there. No one, he interrupted. Deborah was here, but there wasn't much she could do at that point anyway. Which way are we headed? The nurse helped him over to the OR and into one of the changing rooms. The small, impersonal room held nothing but a bed, a robe, and a few machines. It didn't help his loneliness at all. The nurse helped him onto the bed and set the clothing next to him. Do you need help with changing? He shook his head. I'll be fine, thank you. She left and closed the curtain behind her. Lance changed into his gown and set his clothes on the chair next to him. He stared at his phone, knowing he should let someone know what was going on. He sent a quick text to his parents and another to Nikki so she'd know not to wait for him the next day. His text to Deborah was short, and he dropped his phone onto his clothes. Thoughts of everything he'd done over the last couple of days and the time he'd have to waste in the hospital bed again floated through his head as tubes were hooked up to him and the doctors ran through their instructions. It was a relief when the anesthesia finally took over and helped him drift off into sleep. He only hoped that this time his legs would heal correctly. Good morning, Mr. Walker. It's time to wake up, a soft voice said. Lance blinked his eyes, fighting the grogginess still threatening to overtake him. He rubbed his face with his good hand and winced as the IV tugged at his skin. How'd everything go? The surgeon will be in soon to let you know. Once you're feeling up to it, we'll move you to your room. Can I get you anything? The nurse checked the monitors and adjusted the stream of fluid on the IV. I'm fine, just tired. His mouth was dry, most likely from the medicine they'd given him for the pain. All right, let me know. She walked over to check on another patient, and Lance closed his eyes again. It was a few more minutes before the surgeon came in, with his stethoscope around his neck and his mask up on his forehead. Hey, you're awake. The surgery went well. We've pinned that bone so it can't move this time. Everything else looks like it's healing nicely. Once the swelling goes down and we get the stitches out, we'll cast your leg and hand, and you'll be good as new. When do you think that will be? Lance hated how much he slurred. He'd have to have them change his meds so he could be more awake. The doctor laughed. Always looking to get out. It shouldn't be more than a day or two, depending on how well you behave. I'll be an angel. Lance swallowed hard, trying to get moisture in his mouth. The doctor laughed as he left the room. The nurse hurried over and lowered the bed before pushing his gurney into another room. Several nurses moved around the room getting things prepared for him. He just wanted them to leave so he could sleep for the 2 days until they'd let him out. Deborah rushed into the room looking frantic. I can't believe they just rushed you in here like this. What happened? My leg fractured from our dance the other night. His voice was a little sharper than he'd wanted, and he knew he wasn't being fair. The dance hadn't been the only dumb thing he'd done that night, but his mind was cloudy and he didn't want to think anymore. She covered her mouth in shock, her beautiful hazel eyes filled with tears. I'm so sorry. Lance looked away and stared out the window. I think you should leave. Her gasp stabbed into his soul, but he didn't turn back. I didn't mean for that to happen, but if that's what you want, I'll go. Lance could hear her walk away, and he heard a small sob as she walked down the hallway. His heart screamed at him to call her back into the room, but his mind squashed the hurt. If he hadn't been so involved with her, things would have been fine, and he'd still be okay. But that one night had messed up everything, and now he'd have to miss the award show and possibly his fashion show. A single tear ran down his cheek as he continued to stare out the window until sleep took over. She was his everything, but at that point, he needed to push that away and concentrate on feeling better, even if it meant throwing away the one thing that had finally made him feel alive. Chapter 11. Deborah choked down tears as she walked to the train stop. The keys to the Porsche were still in her purse, but she'd just have to give them to Nikki, There was no way she was walking back into the room to hand them back to Lance. And it wasn't like he could do anything with them anyway, not after another surgery. The train came in a few minutes late, and Deborah found a seat in one of the last cars. The rumbling of the tracks passing by was what she needed to help bring on the numbness that came from heartbreak. She should have stopped herself from liking him. It wasn't worth it. Having to see him and work with him would now be awkward. But maybe she could just have Aaron take over the account completely. It would be in good hands, and Deborah could focus on something else. Instead of getting off at the stop that would take her to her apartment, Deborah continued until the end of the line before switching to another train. There was no way she wanted to go home right now. There were too many things left there that would remind her of him, and she didn't need that. After switching trains one more time, she pulled out her phone and pushed a button. It was way too late to be calling anyone, but she knew her brother would answer. A raspy, tired voice answered, "You okay, Deborah?" "Hey, Aaron. Sorry it's so late, but I wanted to visit Mom and Dad. Could you grab me from the bus station?" "I'm not sure Mom and Dad are awake right now. I'll just bring you here and take you in the morning." His voice was more awake now. "What's going on?" Deborah grimaced. "Boy troubles, and that would be great. Thanks." "Of course." He hung up. This wasn't the first time she'd crashed his house after a breakup, but it had been years. Then she'd grown up and decided that relationships weren't worth it. She stepped off the train and walked the 100 yards over to the bus stop. The cold wind and dark night made her a little jumpy, but she didn't care. She just wanted to go home. The bus ride was short, which was a good thing. One of the other passengers stared at her the entire way, and it was getting on her nerves. By the time the bus pulled up to the stop, her nerves were shot. But Aaron was there, like clockwork. She stepped off the bus and ran to his truck to climb in. "Thanks again." She slammed the door and pulled on her seatbelt. "Sophia's not too upset, is she?" "No, she was actually up eating ice cream," he laughed. "Good thing this pregnancy is almost done. I'm not sure my budget can handle much more." Deborah smiled. "I'm sure she feels the same way you do. More so, I think. She's been walking a few miles every day just to get contractions going." Aaron turned onto his street. "So are you going to tell me what happened, or are we just going to pretend like everything is okay?" "He had to have another surgery on his leg because it wasn't healed when he tried to step on it. Instead of letting me help, he pushed me away." Deborah stared out the window as they pulled into his driveway. The house was a cozy little 3-bedroom house with a small yard, but it had been Aaron's home for years. Deborah stepped out of the car and walked up onto the porch. Aaron took Deborah's arm and turned her toward him. "He's in pain, and he's annoyed he's back in the hospital. Give him some time." "I know, but it feels like more than just pushing me out of the room for the evening." She shook her head. "The whole day was just messy." "Oh, Deborah, here you are." Sophia hugged her tightly. "I was so worried when you called. Is everything okay?" Aaron kissed Sophia on the forehead. "She'll be just fine as soon as things cool off. Come on, I'm taking you to bed before you finish off the carton." Deborah watched them leave the kitchen and went to the room they'd saved for her and set her purse on the bed. A crib had been moved into the room, and small nursery toys set on shelves and a rocking chair. It looked as though her spot in their house was about to be taken over, but she could handle sharing it with the new addition. "Sure you don't want to stick around?" Erin flipped a pancake onto the skillet. Deborah shook her head. "I want to see Mom and Dad, but I'll be back tonight for Aiden's game." "Good, he'll be thrilled. Let me get this done and then we'll head over, unless you want to borrow the truck." As tempting as it was, Deborah was done with borrowing cars for a while. "No, I'll just wait. This'll give Mom an excuse to go to the game." "That's true." He slid the pancake onto a plate and wiped his hands. "Okay, let me grab my keys." They left the house and drove the 10 miles to see their parents. Snow fell, but it was light enough that nothing stuck on the ground. It was just gloomy enough to match Deborah's mood. She knew she should be at work, but she had her laptop and she could work at her parents' house. It was too loud at errands with the kids running around. They were great kids, but she needed the quiet for phone calls. Dad's old truck and Mom's small silver car sat in the driveway. Deborah waved and promised again that she'd be at the game before pulling her coat closer and making her way to the front door. The wind promised that more snow was on the way as she knocked. The door opened and her mom squealed when she saw Deborah. "I had no idea you were coming." Deborah gave her mom a hug and kiss before following her inside. It was a split-second decision. Where's Dad? Watching football in the living room. Her mom headed for the kitchen, and Deborah went to find her dad. "Hey, Dad." She dropped into the couch next to her dad's big chair. Her dad turned off the TV and turned to her. "Did I miss a message or something? I had no idea you were coming." "No, I just wanted to come and visit." "Ah, boy trouble again, huh? I really thought this land sky was perfect for you." Her dad scratched his cheek. Deborah laughed. "I did too." "Things are fine, just taking a break for a bit. Hey, I have a little work to do. I'll be upstairs in my room, okay?" "Just use my office. The Wi-Fi works best there." "Thanks, Dad." She grabbed her bag and walked down the hallway to the office, closing the door behind her. She sat at the desk and turned a circle in the large chair, just like she did every time she'd come into this room over the years. After making sure the computer was hooked to the internet, she pulled up her email to get to work. Several had urgent in the inbox, while others were small requests for updates on their advertising. She started with those first, since they were easier to answer. By the time those were done, Deborah's back was aching from sitting at the desk. She stood and walked around the room, looking at the pictures, awards, and trinkets her dad had collected over the years, things she'd studied over and over, but never got tired of seeing. She sat back at the desk and stretched her arms and hands before opening the first urgent email. The owner of the company had decided to redo what they'd planned for the Super Bowl commercial and needed an answer as soon as possible. Deborah groaned. It should have already been sent to production by that time. She typed a quick message saying they'd checked to see what could be done, but as the ads were okayed already, they would probably have to stick with what they had. There were 2 other emails that were similar to the first, and by the 5th email, asking to have the actors switched out, Deborah was ready to scream. She politely answered the email and sent it. A knock at the door brought Deborah back to the present. "Come in." Her mom came in with a plate of cookies and a glass of milk. "Hey, I thought you could use a snack." "Oh, thank you. That's exactly what I needed." Deborah took a cookie off the plate. "Chocolate chip, my favorite." "I know. Your dad tried to eat them all, but I managed to sneak a few in here." Her mom set the plate down. "Did you get everything done?" "Not yet, but I think I'll be done in the next hour or so." "Don't forget your nephew's game. We'll have to leave soon if we're going to get there." Her mom walked to the door. Deborah looked at her watch and gasped in surprise. It had been several hours since she started working. "I'll just finish this last project and then I'll be ready to go. Thanks again for the cookies." Her mom left the room, and Deborah nibbled on the cookies as she went through the Smiths and Jewelers ad, jotting down notes here and there to send back. It was a cute commercial, but there was something missing to it. She stood and stretched before leaving the room to find her parents. It would be good to forget work and just enjoy some hockey again. The game went smoothly until halftime, when Sophia's water broke and it was time to run to the hospital. Aaron helped Sophia out to the car, and Deborah stayed behind to wait for Aiden. Her mom went with Aaron, while her dad stayed back so they'd have a way to drive to the hospital. As soon as it was over, Deborah went down to the hallway to wait for Aiden to come out of the locker room. He had a huge grin on his face. "Did you see that goal? I got it right past the goalie." He gave Deborah a high five. "It was perfect. You did a great job. Now, are you ready to go meet your new baby sister or brother?" His face lit up. "Right now?" "Yep, let's go." Deborah tried to keep up with Aiden, but it was no use. Even though he had all of his equipment, he was still faster than she was. She made it out to the car and climbed into the driver's side. They drove to the hospital to find Deborah's mom pacing back and forth in the waiting room. When she saw them come in, she rushed over. "There you are. They had to rush her into surgery because the baby wasn't doing well with the contractions. We should hear from them soon." Deborah's heart beat rapidly at the thought of something happening to her sister-in-law or the baby. There had been too many medical emergencies in the last few weeks for her to handle, and she had to sit down. Her mom sat next to her and pulled her close. "Hey, it's going to be okay. C-sections happen all the time, and this one will be just fine." Deborah wiped a tear. "I know. I'm just worn out." Her mom kissed her on the forehead. "So, what did happen between you and Lance? Things were so good between you. We could all see it." "It was silly, but that doesn't make it hurt less." She explained everything that happened and stared at her mom when she started laughing. "What?" "Oh, sweetie, haven't you ever been in pain? It makes you cranky and think irrationally. All he wants to do is get back on his feet, and he had to take a big step back. Of course he's going to lash out. Your dad and I had a rough patch after he went through everything, but it's also made us stronger." Deborah stared at her hands. It was easy to say that, and she knew that it was true. She remembered the strain between her parents as her dad got used to the wheelchair, but it didn't stop the hurt. "So what made you get past it?" "Time. Sacrifice. And we had to fight harder to stay together, but it was worth it." She squeezed Deborah's shoulders and stood. "Don't give up." "I know. Thanks, Mom." Deborah pulled out her laptop, but quickly put it away when Aaron came through the door with a huge grin on his face. "She's here. Anna Elizabeth. Everything looks good, but they're going to run some more tests just to make sure." He pulled out his phone to show them pictures. Deborah waited her turn to throw her arms around his neck. "Congratulations, she's beautiful. And how's Sophia?" "She's good. They stitched her up, so now she's resting. Anyway, I'm going to go back and watch them bathe Anna, but you're welcome to come and look through the window." He took Aiden by the hand and left the room. The relief Deborah felt as she walked toward the nursery with her mom was overwhelming. Everything was okay. Now, if only everything would be okay with Lance. She ached to have him there with her. They stayed for a while watching her niece as they cleaned her up and put a pretty purple bow in her thick black hair. It was an hour later when they were finally able to hold Anna. When Deborah's mom handed Deborah the small bundle, she touched the delicate fingers, nose, and cheeks, amazed at what a new life could bring. She couldn't help tearing up at the perfection, but she also wanted to run away from the joy that she felt. Anna squirmed, so Aaron took her back with a smile on his face. Deborah backed away, trying to smile and stay positive, but she really just wanted distance. She kissed her brother on the cheek. "I'm going to take off. I have a meeting in the morning and I need to get back. Congratulations." "Thank you. Do you need a ride?" He turned to his parents. "No, I don't want to take them away from you. I'll be fine. There's a bus right outside. I'll be back this weekend, okay?" He nodded. "Thanks for coming. It meant a lot to Aiden." Deborah smiled and turned away, leaving her family behind. She wanted to get out before anyone else tried to convince her to stay. She had to get out. Too much happiness around her. She stepped onto the bus and looked back at the hospital. She'd be back to see them again. There were just some things that needed to be figured out first. Chapter 12. If it was possible to die of boredom, Lance was pretty sure it would happen to him. He'd done everything he could with his computer from David and had sent the new fashion ideas to his assistants. They had okayed everything and promised to get back to him as soon as they had a pattern to work with. But now, even his creativity had taken a break, and he spent his time staring up at the ceiling. Deborah hadn't called since he'd pushed her away 2 days ago. Aaron had taken over the account, which meant that he was out of luck that way. And Nicky had brought his keys back to him. It made a tempting getaway, but he'd already tried that once, and he was back in a hospital. At least the view outside of his window had changed. His parents had left for Africa once they were sure he was okay. He'd finally convinced them not to redo the house just for him. He didn't plan to spend much time there anyway. The second he got out, he'd be back in his studio. Attending the award show was out of the question by now, but the show was that weekend, and he needed to be ready for it. "Hey, Lance, how are you feeling today?" Dr. Carter came in with one of his assistants. "Loving life. You?" He repositioned himself, not that there was much he could do with his leg up in the air. "Does that mean you don't want to leave? Because I can just tear up your discharge papers if you want me to." He held up the pages. Lance could have hugged him. "Really? I can leave?" Dr. Carter stuck an x-ray onto the screen and turned on the light. "Everything looks great. As long as you promise not to use that leg, you'll be just fine. We'll get the cast on, and then you can leave. I promise. I learned my lesson the last time. No more walking until they're perfect. Scout's honor." He held up 2 fingers. "Are you even a scout?" Dr. Carter raised an eyebrow. "Yes, thanks to my grandma." Dr. Carter chuckled. "Fair enough." Lance stared at his phone for several moments after his doctor left. He ached to call Debra and apologize, but he couldn't bring himself to do it. He had been rude to her, and asking for a favor was not the way to make up for what had happened, especially after waiting a few days. He dialed David's number. David answered on the first ring. "Hey, buddy, I haven't heard from you in a while. I wondered if you were still alive." "Barely. I hate to ask, but can you give me a ride? They're finally letting me out of this place, and I have no way to leave." That sounded really lame, but the truth hurt. And he'd done it to himself. "Of course, I was just about to leave the office, so I can head over right now." "Thanks, man. I owe you one." By the time David arrived at the hospital, Lance was ready to leave. He sported a cast on his hand and leg, and strict instructions not to get out of his wheelchair for any reason except to sleep or shower. As long as he could make it to his show, he was perfectly happy with the idea. Once they were both in David's car, he turned to Lance. "Okay, where to?" "I need to get some stuff from home, and then, if you're good with it, I need some groceries. I'll be staying at work until I can drive again." "You realize that could be 6 weeks, right? You have to go home sometime." David pulled out of the hospital and headed south. "If the healing goes well, I'll be able to walk sooner than that. Besides, I'll be traveling off and on for the next few weeks anyway." There were several shows coming up, and he wanted to attempt to make it to France to see his sister and show off a few of his pieces. David pulled up to the house. "I'd forgotten about the travel. That's going to be pretty rough, isn't it?" Lance shrugged. "I'll do what I can. This shouldn't take too long. My parents were supposed to get a few things together for me." Once they were in the house, Lance went straight for his room. A duffel bag sat on his bed filled with sweaters, pants, and button-up shirts. Lance added a few other things and went to find some food while David zipped up the bag and took it to the car. Labeled containers sat inside the fridge, and Lance grabbed what he could to take with him. After he checked to make sure the thermostat was set correctly and ran faucets to make sure there were no frozen pipes, he locked up and went back toward the car. He'd called to set up a house sitter in the morning until he could get back. David filled Lance in with what had been happening at the ad agency and with his wedding, and Lance told him about the newest line that was coming out. By the time they got into the city, the sun had set, and a cold breeze whipped through the city streets. As they got nearer to Lance's office, they noticed flashing lights and several fire trucks. A crowd gathered around his building. David stopped and parked as close as he could before grabbing Lance's chair. Lance pushed himself as quickly as he could toward the building, grateful that the cast helped protect his hand. He stopped the nearest firefighter that he could find. "What happened?" "Small fire on the second floor. Please move back." Thoughts of the basement ran through Lance's mind. "How is the rest of the building?" Smoke damage probably on the floors near it, but otherwise it should be untouched. Can I go in? I need to check my storage unit. Panic rose in his throat. The fireman narrowed his eyes at him. And you are? David stepped up next to him. He's Lance Walker of Walker Apparel. Is there any threat of the building collapsing? No, go right in. Just don't go near where anyone is working. The fireman glanced down at Lance. It's nice to meet you, Mr. Walker. I'm a huge fan of yours. Lance held out his good hand to shake. It's nice to meet you, too. Good work in there. Come in sometime and I'll help you out. The firemen of this city need to be recognized for their bravery. The man stammered as David pushed Lance past him and into the building. As they went for the elevator, David chuckled. Did you see the guy's face? I thought he was going to faint. David pushed the button and then pushed it again. We have a problem. They would have shut the elevators down for the fire. We'll have to take the stairs. Lance moved over to the stairs and opened the door. Let's go. Wait, I can't exactly pull you down them, and you can't walk. David gripped the back of the chair. Lance turned and looked up at David. Look, decades of clothing are down in that storage room. Decades. This came from collections, my uncle's line, and all the clothing I've designed over the years. The system is to keep the temperatures regulated, but it can't stop it if the water runs through the vents. I need to get in there, even if it means yet another stay in the hospital. Wow, you're serious if you're willing to do that. Okay, I'll carry the chair. You slide down one step at a time. It's only one flight, right? Yep, let's go. He climbed out of the chair and sat down on the steps as David folded the chair and went past him. Lance took one step at a time, imagining the storage area slowly filling with water. David ran back up the stairs and scooped Lance up. You were taking too long. They went down the last several steps and around to Lance's chair. Lance put the code into the door and it slid open, showing the devastation inside. Lance's eyes filled with tears as he watched water drip onto the boxes below. The floor above was all tile, so nothing had stopped the water from the firefighters' hoses. Be back! David ran back the way they'd come, and Lance could hear his feet pound up the stairs. Water had pooled on the ground, soaking into the boxes that stored his life, his memories. Lance rubbed his eyes and pushed forward, trying to figure out where to start. David came back shortly after, followed by several people in coveralls with logos from a disaster cleanup place. Okay, tell them what needs to be done. Lance stared at the boxes. We need a dumpster for the bad boxes, and we need hangers to try to dry out the clothing. The material won't hold up to a washer at this point, so we need to see what we can salvage. We have several racks in the back and some upstairs in my showroom. You heard him. Let's do it. David moved Lance away from the entrance and crouched down near Lance. These are some of the best cleaners I know. They'll take good care of your clothing. How do you know them? Lance watched as they pulled out the racks from the back. This was going to take months. David nodded toward a guy who was telling the others what to do. He's my brother-in-law. His office is just a couple of blocks away, so I convinced him to come and help. He's calling in more people, and if we need more people, I'll send in a request at work to have people come down here. Thank you. Lance swallowed the lump in his throat. I need to contact my insurance. I'll be out in the hallway. David set his hand on Lance's shoulder. We'll fix this. Lance nodded and searched his phone for his agent's number. David left him in the hallway while he explained what happened. They wanted to send out their own group of disaster cleanup people, but Lance insisted that they use the one that was already here. When he was done with that, he called and put in an urgent order for more racks and hangers. Shortly after, he heard the thundering of footsteps as a group of people came downstairs. He groaned when he saw the news reporters. Hey, what are you doing down here? This is a private storage area. A reporter turned and straightened her skirt as she sauntered over to him. Just who we were looking for. We heard of the flooding and wanted to check out the damage. Lance rolled his eyes. Please stay out of the area so we can get things cleaned up. We're racing the clock trying to save as much as we can. Fine, but at least let us ask you some questions. As much as he wanted out of the news, it was better to give them what they wanted instead of letting them make up their own stories. What would you like to know? Chapter 13. Deborah leaned back in her desk chair and stretched her legs. It had been a long day, and she still wanted to try to make it back to the hospital. She'd promised Aaron she'd be there over the weekend, but she was going to get there late. She finished the Smithson account and closed her laptop just as Aaron burst through the door. She leaned against the counter to catch her breath. Follow me. Aaron left the office again, and Deborah had to run to catch her. They met in a conference room where a TV was on. I was in here watching the news to make sure that Jake's soda commercial aired like it was supposed to and came across this. What's this? Deborah folded her arms and stared at the screen. The news came back on and Aaron pointed. They said this was next. Deborah felt like the floor was collapsing beneath her as she watched the nightmare unfold. All of the boxes in Lance's warehouse were being emptied and sorted through. That evening played through her mind as he told her about where the clothing had come from, and now everything was soaked in old sprinkler water that had rusted in the pipes. Aaron nudged her toward the door. Go, he needs you. Deborah nodded and somehow made it back to her office to get her coat. She'd get her other stuff later. Right now, she needed to get there as soon as possible to help out. Lance had been so sure that the clothes would be protected and seemed so proud of the ventilation system. And what about the clothes up in the showroom? She hoped the smoke hadn't damaged them. She waved at Aaron on her way out, cursing her heels as they impeded her running. Traffic was worse than usual as she got closer to his office building, so she finally paid the driver and climbed out to walk the rest of the way. She needed to clear her head anyway. After seeing how much Lance loved what he did, she knew she'd do anything to help him fix this mess. Most of the fire trucks had cleared out since the news clip had been recorded, but cleaners trying to get everything fixed up had replaced them. Instead of waiting for clearance, she slipped around and hurried toward the stairs. The door to the storage unit was wide open as she walked down the hall, and the room was packed full of workers going through boxes. She was surprised to find David there, standing next to Lance. Deborah's heart beat rapidly at the sight of Lance. He hadn't shaved in a few days, and it brought out the green in his eyes. His hand was now in a cast, and so was his leg. David looked over at her and grinned, then gestured for Lance to look over. Lance's face lit up when he saw her. David pushed the wheelchair forward, but stayed where he was to give them privacy. She smiled at him before looking back at Lance. What are you doing here? Lance stopped. Sorry, that's not what I meant. I'm glad to have you here. How'd you know we'd be down here? I saw you on the news and couldn't get here fast enough. I'm so sorry. Deborah couldn't tear her eyes away from his. Sorry for everything. Lance shook his head. You have no reason to be sorry. This was all on me. What can I do to help? Deborah glanced around. They keep telling us they have it under control, but I want to make sure everything is in order. If you could help me get these on racks, that would be great. I can pull them out of the box, but the hangers are a bit much for my hands still. Deborah went to the nearest box and opened it. This one isn't too bad. Do you still want it taken apart? Yes, I want to make sure the moisture doesn't damage them. As they get filled up, they're being taken up to my showroom. Pretty soon we won't be able to walk in there. Lance pulled out a silk blouse and handed it to Deborah. David had disappeared while they were talking, leaving the two of them to work. Deborah would have to thank him later. While the workers took their own sections, Lance and Deborah stayed in their section and went through each box, sorting them as they hung up. As they got nearer to the bottom, the damage was more evident, and it broke Deborah's heart to see what the rusty water had done to the white sweaters and gowns. They were put in a separate bin to see if anything could be done with them. At one point, Deborah caught Lance staring at her as she hung up a wool coat. What? Am I doing it wrong? Lance chuckled. No, there's only one way to hang a coat. I just can't believe you're here. I was really rude to you. What did I do to deserve you? Deborah's cheeks burned. I know how much this meant to you, and that night down here was more fun than I've had in a long time. I couldn't bear to see this place destroyed. Lance took her hand and stroked his thumb across her fingers, sending a thrill through her. You have no idea how much this means to me. Thank you. You're welcome. Deborah picked up a sweater with flowers embroidered around the buttons. It was something she hadn't seen before, but it brought her back to her childhood. An idea ran through her head. Hey, Lance, how close are you to being ready for the show? Everything is ready. Why? He leaned back in his chair. Never mind. Deborah hung up the sweater and moved to the next one. Lance took her hand again and pulled her around to face him. What? Well, all these outfits span decades, right? Deborah swept her arm out to indicate the whole room. Yes? He leaned on the armrest of his chair and rubbed his chin. What if you use some of them for a show, like a retro thing? I mean, look at this. She pulled the sweater off the rack and handed it to him. It's beautiful, and it would be back in fashion again. Either that or I'm way out of the loop. Lance studied the sweater for a moment before nodding. I can see where you're going with it. There are things that have to change since they've been used before, and because some of them aren't my line, but I think we could make it work. Great. I just figured since everything is out on racks, it might be easier to use. Deborah squeezed around the rack and hurried over to another one where she found a pantsuit. From what she could see, it was undamaged, so she took it back over to Lance. Here's another one you could use. Lance pulled out his phone and sent a text. I'm having Nikki and Ella come down here. They've been upstairs supervising the workers up there, but I want to hear their opinion. You're sure you don't want to just stick with what you already have? It's a beautiful line. The black gown came to mind. I can use some of the gowns, but then sell the others for upcoming award shows. I do have one stipulation, though. His eyes danced. Deborah's stomach jumped nervously as Lance took her hand and kissed it. What's that? Okay, so two, actually. I want you to wear the dress you wore that night. It was perfect on you. It could be the final piece of the night. I've never done a show before. I'd probably trip and fall. Her protests were cut short with another kiss on her hand. He smiled up at her. We can teach you, please. I need you to be in it. Deborah sighed and pushed away the wave of panic. Fine. What's the other one? I need a date to the Grammys on Sunday, and I'd love for you to accompany me. It's the only way they'll get me out there in this thing. I need you there. His eyes pleaded with her. Deborah leaned down and kissed him softly on the lips, something she'd missed since that night. Of course I'll be your date, as long as I get the black gown you designed. Good, because I realized that I designed that dress just for you. Lance kissed her back, putting his arms around her. The warehouse seemed to dissolve around her as she allowed her feelings to come back up to the surface. When they finally broke away, it was hard to stand up straight with her knees as weak as they were. Now, let's get this thing planned. Lance pushed his way past the rack of clothes and waved Nikki and Ella over. Deborah watched as he explained what was going to happen, then took over when he had her explain the vision. Nikki clapped her hands together in excitement, and they got to work finding pieces that would work. Chapter 14. Lance checked his tie again for the fourth time. He asked himself yet again why he came to these fashion shows. It made him sick to his stomach to be out there talking to the crowd. But this time, he had his lucky charm. A glance in the mirror showed Deborah getting makeup put on. She looked stunning in the dress, with the diamond necklace he had given her for Valentine's Day. Nikki readjusted her microphone and cleared her throat. Anthony just finished. It's time. Those words always sent a wave of fear through him, but this time Lance smiled and nodded. Let's do it. Everyone had been expecting the line they'd been working so hard on. News had leaked about what would be here tonight, but no one had a clue about what would hit them. He hadn't even told Anthony. He wheeled himself toward the stage and took a deep breath before going out to talk to the crowd. Tonight I wanted to do something special. We call it a walk through time. He continued as the first models came on stage, sporting clothes from the 20s. Just as he'd suspected, there was a stunned silence just seconds before the crowd went wild. The models Ella had chosen were perfect, and he couldn't help the pride that washed over him as each group came out dressed in clothes from each decade. When it came to the 70s, he spoke again. Tonight is dedicated to a special woman. She brought me hope when I was devastated by injuries, and a joy that I never thought I could feel. Everyone, I introduce to you Debra Thomas. Debra came out onto the stage, and with a small push from Nikki, she made her way down the catwalk. Her steps were sure, and she blew a kiss as she stood at the end of the stage. As she turned and came back, she winked at Lance. The show continued on, and as they came to the final decade, the pieces he had made that were supposed to be the focus of tonight's show were modeled. And of course, Debra was in the black gown. Her hazel eyes shone as she walked out in front of the other models and stood while the cameras went crazy. Whistles came from the back where Lance knew Debra's family stood, and Lance choked up just a little. It was wonderful to have Debra's family there to enjoy his work. It finally felt like he'd arrived. Debra leaned her head against Lance's chest and they curled up on her couch. It's here. Lance took the newspaper from her and opened it up to the fashion section. Pictures of his clothing designs splashed across the page, along with the reactions to his sudden change in plans. It had been a bigger hit than he'd thought it would be, and orders were pouring in. He kissed the top of Debra's head. Anthony's a little upset with us, you know. He brushed away her hair that tickled his chin. Why is that? She asked. He chuckled. We blew him away. Your idea was genius. You're the one who made it happen, though. She glanced up at him, resting her chin on her hand, just inches from his face. He touched her nose and traced her lips. True, but it wouldn't have happened without you. Which means that I just need you to stick by me. You can do that, right? She leaned forward and kissed him. When she pulled away, she smiled. I have no intention of going anywhere. This has been Fashioned for Love, a Silver Script Novel, Book 3, written by Jacqueline Hardy, narrated by Holly Sturm. Copyright 2016 by Jacqueline Hardy. Production copyright by Dragons and Fairy Tales Press.